Right, good evening, everyone.
It's Friday, 8 p.m.
I'm Andy.
And I'm Debs.
Welcome to Codes of the Unknown.
Don't be afraid. Good evening and welcome, everybody. Tonight's guest is the host of Scottish Paranormal Podcast, covering a range of subjects from UFOs to alien abductions, ghosts to cryptids and everything in between. And may I add personally, the bloke they've clearly overlooked to replace Daniel Craig as 007, it's Chris Meek. Welcome to the show. Just let me take that off. Hello.
Right. Hi, guys.
Good evening.
Hi, Andy.
Nice to have you here.
Hi, you all right, Chris?
Nice to be here. Happy birthday, Deborah.
Thank you very much. Another year older, but not another year wiser. Definitely not. And thank you all for the happy birthday wishes in the chat as well. I haven't had a chance to say thank you individually, but thank you. I've had a chippy tea, so I'm quite happy now. So,
all good.
All good.
All good.
Right, Chris, kick off with how you got, what your first experience, how you got started in all this.
In terms of getting started all this, I think it stems back for basically stuff that happened in my own house, and like that kind of got me into looking at paranormal stuff when I was younger.
Yeah.
So reading all the old kind of, if you can remember the unexplained books used to get with the,
I used
collecting
to love
them up with the kind of leather. Blue leather binder and all that kind of stuff. So I came into all that kind of stuff, interested in UFOs right through from early childhood. But some of the kind of strangest stories I heard, it was mainly, one of them stemmed from my own house, which goes back when I was in probably early, I think at the time it was maybe about 11 or 12, but it did stem back earlier than that.
Yeah.
Some of the ones where, when I was younger, my mum and my sisters, or my mum anyway, used to say I used to see something when it was like, I'd say probably when I was like 4-year-old. And I think all kids see things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, all kids say to their parents they see a man in the room or something there anyway. I couldn't remember it at all. I mean, but to the point where I used to say this, it was the same person. I used to say it was like a tall man with a suit, and I used to say he had dark glasses, and I bun it, and I bun it in terms of Scotland as like a hat. So I was just describing a hat as a kid. I mean, I'm not saying it was the Hat Man or anything like that. I think my mum at the time used to think it was like my dead grandfather or something like that, but she wasn't sure. But I used to see it quite a lot, and I used to see it when like she was there, and I'd said I'd seen it when it was in my room and things like that. So that kind of was there, and it used to kind of freak her out a wee bit.
Yeah.
And I think where some of the stuff stemmed from, we moved house and we moved to another property, and I think when you've got basically a household with a number of different kids in it and adolescents and stuff, you always get some type of kind of activity, or it's maybe you can just maybe have it hyped up with just the kids' imaginations and all that kind of stuff. But this was a bit more than that.
Yeah.
It kind of started off with, I wouldn't say exactly poltergeist-like activity, but it was the house had a right kind of funny feel to it, and I'm not mean funny, haha. I mean it was just a right kind of strange atmosphere in it. I used to really have a right bad fear of the dark in the house. Don't know why, but I just did. One of the kind of stories that I'll kind of go back to, my sister she was 14 or 15. She came home from school early. She'd probably like plug into school. You know what plug into school means? You get that down in England. It's called plug into school, like bunking off from school.
All right.
All right. Yeah.
We call it dog in the school. We call it dog in the school, or it doesn't mean actual dog in school.
Yeah.
That'd have been fun. I just stayed around for lessons.
We call it plugging or dog in the school, right? So she was probably doing a bit of that, and so nipping away early, and there was nobody else in the house. So I think at the time she was like 14 or 15, and she was washing the dishes at the kitchen sink or getting a glass of water. I can't remember exactly what it was. She was doing one of the two. She probably wasn't washing the dishes because she probably wasn't that way inclined to actually wash the dishes when nobody else was there. So I'll say she was getting a drink of water.
Yeah.
So she was getting a drink of water, and somebody grabbed her from behind, and she turned round thinking it was my other sister, because I've got basically 3 older sisters that I stayed in the house with, and she thought it was her. She turned round to probably say something quite abusive to her, and there was nobody there, and it was an actual grab, a grab on her shoulder. So she totally freaked out. She went out the house and she just shut the door, and she sat on the step until my mum came home from work. So I think my mum was home early and the rest of us for school and stuff. So she came home and mum asked her what had happened, and she explained what had happened. So she was in the kitchen and something grabbed her from behind, and she wasn't able to go back into the house. And my mum explained to her that it happened to her and a few times in the house as well, but like things grabbed her or grabbed her in the back or touched her and things like that. But she wasn't the one to tell anybody. One, for being perceived to being either crazy or
making it up.
Yeah, or I wouldn't even say making it up, but either just kind of making a big deal of something, or another aspect, it was maybe was the one to scare the kids as well. So you're not going to say to your teenage daughters and your younger kids that you've got a ghost in the house or anything like that. So that's kind of where it started for them. And my mum had a few things that happened to her in the house, and she said, but she wasn't wanting to lay it for the fact that it was the one to scare the kids and all that.
Yeah.
My dad was a long distance lorry driver. So he was away most of the week. So he was away out the house probably Monday morning, come back on a Friday night. Yeah. And so you can imagine, so we're in the house, mum, myself, and 3 older sisters. Yeah. So things, that kind of stuff kind of happened quite a lot in that. And there was other things that happened in the house as well. So we had like pet cats, 2 cats, and they would see something. They would have a definite drawing their eye to something, that they could see something that we couldn't see. And that would happen on occasion, quite a lot. But when you seen that, it would just put a certain atmosphere into the house as well, because they weren't just chasing some type of insect or something like that. They were actually looking at something in the middle of like the living room area, like moving about and stuff like that. So that kind of thing happened. And other things happened as well, where we used to think we had a prowler. Right. So we had quite a lot of the time in the house, it was like we had either, I think there must have been more to it rather than just the door handle, right? Because like it was quite a lot of things happening in a sense where the door handle went quite a lot. Yeah. And it wasn't just the type of door handle, it was just turning itself, or it was quite a strong spring. So if you can imagine, like a kind of lever door where you kind of push it down, right? But the spring in it was like strong. You'd hear the spring going before you'd hear creaking. You'd actually hear it creaking, because it was quite a strong kind of new door type thing, right? Yeah. So you would hear that, and you'd actually see the door going. And so it got to the point where sometimes you would go to the door and open the door and there would nobody there. And out the back area of the house, if you can imagine, on the left-hand side, we had roughly about a 4.5 foot fence. It wasn't like a small picket fence. It was in between having like a 6 foot fence, a larger fence. Maybe about 4.5 feet, just slightly kind of smaller than one of the larger fences. But it's not a type of fence you could just easily just step over. I mean, you can still climb over it.
Throw yourself over.
You need to get up and climb over to go over it. You wouldn't be able to just like jump over it like a small picket fence. So that was on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, we had the same, but then there was like right thick, large hedges. And the hedges went up roughly about 7 or 8 foot. And this went back up to a kind of triangular point. So the garden went up to a kind of point. You can imagine it was like a circular or oval shape with a lot of houses in an estate. And we were semi-detached. So, cut a long story short, there was nowhere to go out the garden, right? We had a fence with a gate, and there was places to go. But if you opened the door pretty quick, you would see somebody. You would see somebody there. You would see somebody scaling a fence. You would hear somebody rustling a bush. Or you would see somebody trying to get through the gate or whatever. So it got to the point where it happened quite a lot. And I was a bit younger at the time, but it affected my mum that much as she phoned the police a few times. So she got the police up, nobody there at all. And but it's interesting though, you when you hear other cases with loads of other different phenomena, when you get either poltergeist phenomena, you get Sasquatch phenomena, you get UFO phenomena, you always get this type of prowler-like thing happening as well outside the house as well as inside the house. You get things, somebody looking in the window, somebody trying the door, somebody banging on the side of the house, all these type of things. And it just seems to come with some type of phenomena. So that was kind of happening on occasion, to the point where you got quite, we had a dog as well. So the dog would even be at the door dribbling. So the dog would sense somebody there, and then the handle would go, and to the point where you would let the dog out and it would run out and there would be nobody there. So the dog would catch them. And to the point where we would open the door pretty quick and there would be nobody there. But you actually sometimes could see the handle going up, and you couldn't actually make that handle go down. So that kind of happened. So they phoned the police a few times, nothing came of it. Didn't catch anybody. You could easily write it off as a prowler, but there was nobody to go. There was nobody there. So, but there's nothing you can do with it. I mean, you just kind of park it at the back of your mind that you rationalise all these different types of things, like you do with anything. So that was kind of one thing. There's another thing where my sister had a bedroom downstairs next to the living room, and my mum was in the living room one day, and my sister heard her scream, and she kind of ran through to find out what had happened, and what had transpired. But she was in the living room, and she said this black mass had came out the floor, and then just like a black shadow mass type thing came out the floor, and then disappeared into the adjacent wall. So the adjacent wall would have been my neighbour's house, and so that happened, and like they were totally terrified. And I never knew this story until I was older. Because actually, when I kind of started the podcast, I went back to my sisters and I was asking them about more stories, and just I knew some stories, but I was wanting to try and get a bit more feeling what was happening and stuff. So that was one of the other ones. There was another story as well where I had a friend contact me, and he even said, "Could you not remember we seen a black thing as well?" He goes, we were in the living room and we had this kind of glass cabinet, and the door opened, and this black thing shot away to the side. I couldn't remember the instance, but he was adamant. He said, "No, that happened. I can remember being in your living room and we seen this thing." So my sister, when she was a wee bit older, she had one of her boyfriends staying in the house, and he woke up during the night, or he basically woke her up during the night, and he said he'd had a dream, but he swore it was real, right? He said it was like, he basically parked it as a dream, but he said he woke up, this is his dream, woke up, and he could see some small creature, right? So in these type of houses, it was like, if you can imagine, it's like an ex kind of council house, I mean, semi-detached. It's like a 3-bedroom, or was it 3-bedroom? No, 4-bedroom house. I mean, well, a dining room downstairs, but we had it as a room. So in that, and so they were staying in that bottom room. It had like these wooden walk-in wardrobes. They only maybe go in about 400 millimeters into the wall. So they're not deep, right? So they had the doors open, and he said he woke up and he seen this creature standing in the door, and it was like, he said it was only about 3 foot tall, and he said it was an ugly troll-like creature. That's what he seen. And then this thing, but you need to remember, he's relaying this as a dream, right? He's saying it was a dream. He said he's sure it happened. He goes, but it was like it was a dream he had. But he said, I'm sure this thing happened. And he was kind of in between the two things, with thinking, did it happen? Did it not happen? Or he just rationalized it as a dream, right? So he's seen this creature type thing, and it transformed into like a man, like a larger man, and then it disappeared, right? But that's it. So if you rationalize that as a dream, that's fine. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what he did. So it's interesting though, because it ties in later on with one of the other bits of the story, which I'll get to.
Yeah.
So I'll tell the story up to for what I knew yet, and then I'll go on to tell you what I kind of found out about after it, right? So that was that. There was a few other kind of strange things that happened in the house, just maybe more stuff with the cat and all that kind of stuff, more prowler kind of stuff, and there was other things where, I don't know, you just had that total uneasy feeling of dread, which could possibly just be the imagination of kids and being in the house themselves and all that. You could rationalise that as well. So we're always good at rationalising anything that happens to try and park it out your brain or whatever. So that was it. So the story I knew, and it was like one of the weirdest stories I'd heard, because my dad was a total skeptic. He wasn't into anything, and even like my mum and that weren't outwardly into any paranormal stuff. I mean, I had like obviously unexplained stuff, and it was probably my sister that had it passed down to me, but it was just what any probably normal household would have. I mean, you have more books and stuff now. You've just got the internet, and you've got Google or whatever else, or Facebook, and or YouTube and stuff. You know what I mean? But then we read a lot of books, or you watched up to STV, and then basically channels 1, 2, and 3, and then eventually go to channel 4. So you read books and stuff like that, or you had like VHS video or whatever. You went and rented a video. I could remember the off license to rent out videos years and years ago.
Before Blockbusters.
That's it. Back in the day, global and stuff. So all of that. So the story I could remember, and I went back to my sister to get relayed a bit of it as well, because I could remember it. It was one of the weirdest stories I'd kind of actually heard, and I think it seemed more weird for me and more strong for me, and it struck more of a chord for me, is because my mum and dad, it happened to them. It didn't happen to me personally, it happened to them. And my dad was a complete skeptic.
Right.
And so what I can remember is my mum and dad weren't getting on. My sister and that were out. I was out the house as well. It was probably winter time, because I could mind it coming in, it was dark. And I must have only been about 12 or something. But it was winter time, because I'd probably still out playing, and it being maybe like 8 at night, and it was dark or whatever. You know what I mean? So I came in, and they were looking around the living room for something, and they couldn't, like, basically my mum kind of ushered me off my bed, and the story, what actually happened is, though, they weren't getting on. They were in the middle of a heated argument in the living room, and in the process of the argument, I don't know what was kind of the inner workings of the argument, but that comes later, is the door burst open, right? So the door burst open in the living room, and this door wasn't the type of, it was a kind of heavy door. We had a thick carpet, so to push the actual door open, it wasn't like a handle door, right?
Right.
So if you can imagine the doors, it's got like a wee spring-loaded ball that you can push in and out. It falls into a wee hatch hole type thing, and you can just push it. So you could push it open, right? But it took a good bit of pushing to push the door, because it had a heavy carpet behind the other side. So you need to kind of push it, and you feel the carpet going. So and that kind of stuck in our minds. I could remember that, like the door and stuff. So middle of a heated argument, the door gets like pushed open, right? And this black thing flies in the living room, and it's like a black, just a black mass, right? And it goes round my dad's legs, right? And then it shoots over behind the couch, and it disappears. And my mum was when she was relaying the stories, and it totally freaked him out. And all he kept saying was, "It didn't have a head. It didn't have a head." So whatever this thing was, it was off the ground, went round his legs, and then it shot off behind the couch and disappeared. They couldn't find what it was. The two cats were outside. It wasn't a cat. The dog was in the kitchen, locked in the kitchen. So it was just this thing. So like shortly after that, like the one getting on, the split up and stuff, and then my dad, we moved no long after that elsewhere, and my dad sold the house and moved just to a town up the road. I mean, it was a total mad story, and it was like 150% happened.
Yeah.
I mean, and my dad probably never told another soul about it.
No.
And but it was just absolutely nuts, like this thing. So like this house, I don't know what it was about the house. The house was just had that kind of really, really bad feeling about it. And
something attached to it.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Aye, definitely. So the mad thing was when I started the podcast as well, and it's mad how about the synchronicities of things that when you look at stuff and you end up going back round to it comes back to you or whatever. So I done a few podcasts, and I was doing one about there was a UFO, quite a strong UFO case in Scotland where it was in the town I stayed in.
Right.
And it was the Black Triangle one you mentioned earlier on, which we'll talk about in a wee bit. But it was basically, so I've done that. I'm just trying to lose my train of thought that I was talking about. So I done that podcast, and it was funny because I was doing a podcast with Timothy Renner. He does he's one of the podcasts in America, and he was telling him about the black ball, whatever it was, in my dad's legs and stuff. And he says, "Did you ever get a good description of your dad?" I says, "Well, unfortunately," I said, "my mum died when I was younger."
Yeah.
And my dad I'd actually been estranged from my dad for years. I hadn't really spoken to him for about 18 years. And I just got back in touch with him long before COVID.
Yeah.
And then he died right at the start of COVID. So I didn't really get much a chance to kind of talk to him and stuff like that. And anyway, I don't think I'd probably brought it up anyway.
No.
But he probably wouldn't have told another soul about the story. So I was relaying that to Timothy, and I said to him, I can't really get a description of really a bit more detail what happened for the fact that my parents are dead now. You know what I mean? So the mad thing was I done the podcast with the man. His name is Andrew Swan, about the Black Triangle UFO, which was literally it was maybe about a mile from my house.
Right.
Interesting case, right? So that when I done the podcast with him, he relayed that he also had more recently seen orb type or UFO type things in the last few years, some more recently, and he was describing in the same area where he's seen the last UFO.
Right.
So coming out of that podcast, somebody else contacted me and said, I've seen basically the same type of thing. And they were talking about seeing like an orange orb type thing.
Right.
In the town, at the the south end of the town in the sky, which is run about the same area where this guy had seen the other things as well, but unbeknown to the person who contacted me. So the funny thing was, the person who contacted me was my mum's best friend,
Right.
who stayed across the road from me when I was younger. So I'd asked her about the story, and I said, "Did you know about the story?" And she says, "Yeah." She goes, "I know all about it." And it was interesting what she told me after that.
Yeah.
Just gonna get a quick drink.
Yep.
So I actually done a podcast with her recently to get the full story. I did get a bit of the story off her, but it was good to hear it for what she had to say. So it's quite interesting though, because I know some of this. I did know bits of this story after kind of finding out bits when I was older and stuff. But that was always a story I could remember, the black thing around my dad's legs and disappearing. So the actual story was and how it happened as well, where my mum and this lady across the road and a few other friends went to see a few psychics at a psychic fair.
Oh, yeah.
In the outskirts of Glasgow. And there was a good psychic there, and my mum never got taken on that day because I think the lady was booked up and too busy.
Right.
So she'd said, I think she invited her back at the house at a later date and was maybe going to get a few people round to do readings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
nothing kind of sinister or nothing, just basically get a couple of readings and whatever as people do. So, so that was it. So when this time came, the my mum met. This was the story we're getting related to, and I've got it podcasted, and you hear. I've actually, her name's Jean, and she tells the whole story. It's going. It's quite interesting. So she basically said my mum was waiting at the gate for the psychic to come.
Right.
So she appeared, and straight away she said, "There's kind of something wrong here." She wasn't really. She had a really, really bad feeling about the house, and at the front of her house there was like huge rowan trees.
Right.
Like 2 huge rowan trees, and we also had a big rowan tree right at the back. So it was like a triangle set of rowan trees in the house, right? So in going with the rowan tree thing, the rowan trees can mean a lot of different things, and like especially like Celtic mythology and things like that. So they were sometimes used to ward off evil.
Yes.
And things like that. So the interesting thing about this was that it ran right through like the area where this thing was seen as well, right? I'm just putting 2 and 5 together and coming out with 6, right? But it was so you've got like the rowan trees, but the interesting thing about the rowan trees were they were huge, right? Rowan trees don't grow that quick, right?
No, they're not slow growers.
Totally, if you see a rowan tree is 25-year-old, it'll still have quite a short or small radius, actually like its trunk and stuff. But these were big. I can remember as a kid being climbing right up inside them and stuff. They were big rowan trees. They must have been there for when the house was built or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was like the place where I'm not going to say where the house was because people stay there to this day, right? But it was quite a prominent high point in the town. And I always wondered what was there because it was a prominent high point in the town. You usually get things there in days gone by and stuff. So I don't know what was there. I had tried to look into to find out if there was anything there in the past before it, but I couldn't really find anything yet. So anyway, the psychic came and she was one thing she said there was a bad feeling about the house. She also said that there was something to do with the rowan trees, and she made reference to them but didn't go into detail. But when me looking at rowan trees, that's what they were for. The strange thing, there's different explanations for them. One was to ward off evil. Another one was to ward off changelings. I mean, which is totally mad. Right? Yeah. So that was kind of that bit of the story. And then, so they done the readings, got to my mum, and the lady was really, really good at what she did and stuff. And she told my mum that she said basically there was something dark in the house. And she also went on to say a few other things. And she said, my mum, she said, like my dad was having an affair, right? So, and she knew he was a lorry driver. She basically said he's a lorry driver. He drives his colour truck. He's this, he's that, and he had him down to a T. And then he said, I'm sorry to tell you, but he's having an affair. And she described the woman and all that kind of stuff, and all in a lot of detail. And it was evident he was doing it.
Yeah.
So all that aside, all finished away. So the weekend, so that was maybe like midweek or whatever. So the weekend my dad came back, that was when my mum confronted him, and that was the argument where this thing was seen.
Right? Yeah.
So the thing was, she said that the same story as I knew, that they were having my mum confronted my dad about this, right? And he denied it, and they were having this like hell of an argument, and the door burst open, and this thing came in. And they said it was on. She said that it was actually on the couch, and it was going round on the couch that fast that they couldn't discern what it was.
Wow!
It was moving that fast they couldn't discern what it was. No spinning. I think they said it was just running on the couch.
Right.
Moving that fast they couldn't see what it was. Right. And then it disappeared. And then for some reason or another, they moved. It was either shortly after or not long after they went to the next room. And there was an awful smell in the next room.
Right.
And in the corner of that room, they seen there was like a 2.5 to 3 foot, just ugly wee man. It was just like a small man, and it was like the way she described it. It was like the personification of evil. She said this thing just oozed evil. It was like just there, and then it disappeared. So it had this kind of foul stench smell. And the thing disappeared. My dad owned up to it, he was like, he was totally like, just, you can imagine after that. So when after that, they split up. I moved away to another town, my mum, and my mum never even took anything. I mean, like, never took him for anything or whatever. And then he sold the house and he moved pretty quick to the next town over. And I just found it one of the most strangest stories. I mean, it was, and because I know what happened, because it was my mum and dad were quite totally plausible people.
Yeah.
They weren't just into believing anything or whatever. My dad was a total skeptic, and it totally freaked him out. You know what I mean? But the thing is, I think Gina brought it up as well, talking about to somebody else about the story, and she said after that, she goes, she only actually went back in that house about once, but I think at that point, my mum had left and stuff like that, and whatever. So the ribbon trees are cut down now. So I went and they've cut them down. I was in her house. She still stays across the road from the house.
Right.
So I was in there, and I was looking over and stuff, and they've cut them down. So I don't know what that means, but I'll need to I'll go a bit more digging about it. But the funny thing was as well, I asked my neighbour, because I kind of got in touch with one of my neighbours who stayed, who the same age as me when I was younger. I used to play with him, and he was next door. And I asked him, I said, like, kind of strange stuff used to happen in the house. We never spoke at the time about it, but the then never happened in your house, because if the then happened in this house, potentially it could be happening in there. You know, it's like you're only separated by like a 200 mil wall or something like that. So. And he said, no, nothing ever happened in that house. And he was the same. He was the youngest. He had an older brother and 2 older sisters. So he said, no, nothing happened in that house. He goes, but in the last house before that, he said they had seen a black shadow thing at the bottom of the bed. So it's just mad how all these kind of stories kind of intertwine. And
It's strange.
It's an I mean, I found it a really interesting story, but one of the things that that Jean had kind of found out, or no, it might not be this, but it was somebody explained that as Roth or Astaroth, or what the name is. I mean, which is some type of demon or whatever. That was the way it was explained. That's what that somebody said. That's what that is. That thing, and it was like something to do with secrets and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know, but it was just nuts, like. But the interesting thing is, somebody contacted me recently from the same town, and basically said that they were looking into. I think they were looking into a bit of like Aleister Crowley and stuff like that,
right?
And they had seen the same thing, in the same town. Roughly the same thing. I don't know. It's just a long email, and I'm going to get her on and stuff like that. But she's kind of like she's seen kind of like the same thing. So it was just it's just a mad story. I mean, it really is. It always kind of intrigued me and I think having that in my head, and I kind of forgot about all that kind of stuff, and that's why I had to go back and ask my sisters about it and get some more of the info. And it was just funny how it came back round again, and then finding more out about it.
So that seems like it might not have actually been concentrated in your house, but it could have been in the area you were in then, all over the area.
I don't know, maybe. I think there was, going with the house, there was maybe something there already.
Yeah.
Like,
so was it, sorry, I was just going to say, was it around the same time that they seen it as what you did?
I don't know. Because she's only emailed me and just basically said, I found interesting stories, and I've seen something like that when I was younger, and I was into Aleister Crowley and stuff, but she's never relayed the times and dates. I've not spoke to her or done the podcast with her yet, and that, but I'm waiting her coming back to me, because I'm more interested actually in the story rather than just kind of getting the podcast of like what I want to hear, because it's obviously it's linked to me personally. But the mad thing was that whole event like just totally restructured my life, which is mad, because I moved to another town. I mean, and my mum and all that kind of stuff, and it was just it totally just changed my life. I'm not blaming the house. I mean, because nothing really, apart from the fear aspect to it, which is like something actually feeding on fear, or something feeding on, the way I seen it is something feeding on negative energy.
Yes,
that's what I kind of looked at in my head. It's something like that, feeding the negative energy. It was in the house, but it was almost a bit of a mix of that and maybe causing fear or trying to cause fear. You always, get this thing with like adolescents and children and stuff like
Yeah.
that, where it's like it's you get some type of phenomenon. And I don't know if it's just they're more susceptible to maybe seeing these things, or they things can see them, or whatever. But it just seems to be you're a bit more susceptible to it when you're younger.
I think you do get to a certain age though, where you stop seeing things.
Yeah.
I think I last saw something at about 11, and then it started up again in my late teens. 11, 12 maybe. And then it starts up again in your late teens. It's like you sort of, there's a hiatus and you get on with what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably because you've got a lot to do at that age, haven't you?
The mad thing was, you know what it is? I think when you're younger, for a prime example, and a lot of people have experienced this, is we stayed next to, like, down south you'd probably call it moorland, but up here we'll call it mossland.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's mossland. So it's like heather and trees and stuff like that. And we would just go out and play for the day, as kids did back in the 80s. You would just go out and not come back till like 6 at night and stuff.
Streetlights come on.
Total
Has it
neglect,
got,
extreme neglect, right? But that's the way it was then.
Yeah.
And so my kids are chained to the house. You know?
Yeah.
So so we used to go out for the day and you just go out and play and stuff. But I can remember where, and back then when I was a kid, I wasn't looking for any ghosts, I wasn't looking for any UFOs, I wasn't looking for any feelings or anything. But I mean, when you go to sometimes and you go to a certain place, you can feel something coming from that place. So if there's been something negative happened there or whatever, even if you don't, you can. I've been in a few places. There were some places where I'd been in that town, and it was like, it sticks in my mind. I could always remember where you just get that really, really unnerving feeling of dread, or like just the creeps, right?
Uncomfortable, yeah.
And aye, totally. And you would get it in some places, or you would. It's just almost like if there's been something happened there and it's sustained it for some reason.
Yeah,
That's kind of what it's like. But the interesting thing was, which I'll lead into when I was a bit older. So all that aside, moving on, and I was a bit older and stuff. And the one thing it brought it back for me was I was out running one day, and I was doing a lot of training and stuff, and no thinking about. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still had an interest in like the paranormal and UFOs.
Yeah.
I wasn't outwardly looking for anything. I wasn't going out investigating. I wasn't doing anything. As far as it went, it was reading the odd book now and again. That was it. And if like something in my house went bump in the night, I would put it down to something else. I would turn around and say, it's the radiator, it's this, it's that. I mean, I'm that bad with that kind of stuff where I'm kind of, I wouldn't say, I'm not a skeptic, I'm a skeptical believer. So like my TV would turn off, I just go and turn it back on again. It would turn off, I'd go and turn it back on again. It turned off, I'd go and turn it back on again. So I'm running the TV here. Somebody's trying to tell me something.
Have an argument.
So that's as far as we go. So I was out running one day, and I used to run this kind of circuit around the hills in Bathgate, and I seen there was a wee bit of forestry. I used to run. There's different like country parks and stuff. And there's a bit of forestry I'd never ran in before, and when I was on the road, I was looking in, and I seen small trails and that, and then I thought I'm going to come up the next day and maybe just go for a wee run in there to see where it goes. And I'd never been in it before, and I ran in this bit of flat land in forestry, and I could mind I got to this one bit of the forest when it got a bit deeper, and it was like going back to that place when you're a child and having that fear and that dread. That's exactly what it was like. And it was this is before reading anything like John Keel and talking about the Oz Factor or anything like that at all.
Yeah.
To me, I just kind of had like the chills. It was something negative or something evil or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know, I chalk it up to being evil, but it gave me some intense fear. And I would no purposely had anything like that in my mindset. It was funny because I was just out running and it stopped me in my tracks.
Yeah.
About going into this bit of forest. And I'm not normally, as I said, I'm not normally like that in a sense where if my TV or anything, I would turn it off. That's the kind of analogy I was giving you. So I wouldn't have the fear or anything like that. But this time it did. It totally gave me extreme fear at this one bit. And it was like going back to having that feeling when you're a child and you feel that sensation. That's exactly what it was like at this one place. Never had that before in my life. Apart from that, like, this other place I had in Armadale, right? So, and really, really strange feeling. So that was that. That was. I must have been like early 20s then. So it was probably more than, it was 20 odd year ago, 22 years ago or something like that.
Surely not.
Aye, something like that. So it was years ago. And the interesting thing was then my first podcasting story, which was about the Silverman. So the Silverman story was in the Bathgate Hills. There was somebody had seen some type of creature type thing, right? And I'd never ever known the story, never heard of the story. And I know Deborah Hadswell had covered that, and I know there was a few people in a Bathgate Hills group I was in, so it was a kind of walking group, and there was people talking about it there and stuff like that. I'd never heard it before, and so the Bathgate Hills is quite big. It's maybe like an area where you're maybe talking geographically, it's maybe 10 miles by 10 miles or something, or maybe not as much as that, but there's like country parks, just a lot of farmland and small hills and stuff. So I kind of never heard of the story, and I was quite interested in it. So I reached out and I found the guy. I reached out to him, and then he agreed to take me to the spot and tell the story and stuff like that, and go over it. And so I'd kind of been up to see it before, because he said he was going to meet and stuff like that and whatever, and I kind of got an idea of where the location was. And when he came and showed me, it was like 50 metres for that spot where I had the dread feeling 20 years prior, 20 odd years prior. Where he'd seen it. So his story was he had, it was like I think it was 88, he said it was. And he was driving back from, it was like an October or November night or something. It was pretty dark, cold. He'd been away shopping with the kids. And back then, not a lot, it was like having a car was a pure novelty and stuff like that, like back in the 80s. And so he was just taking the kids a wee kind of short drive before they went home, and they drove up the Bathgate Hills. And they got to, there's a bit of Bathgate Hills where this spot is, where it kind of comes along a road and it kind of goes over a wee hill and then turns a corner. Right. So they drove up, and before they got to this small wee kind of dip hill bit, it came up in the road, there was something standing on the side of the grass, and the grass at the side. It crouched down, and then as soon as they drove up, it stood up and it ran. And they said it was looking over its shoulder, but I said the description it was funny because they said it ran really, really fast, like really fast. And it was kind of turning around and looking as it was running.
So it wasn't watching where it was going.
Aye, but it said it ran round in a horseshoe shape. And then the type that when they came, if you can imagine, they were driving towards this thing and it got up and it ran, right? And then they were over the hill. So they kind of, like, as soon as they, you're talking maybe, it had been seconds where they seen it, but long enough to actually see it and get some type of description. But the funny thing with the description was they said that it was a bulky thing, pretty big, but it was more like a light type thing as well. It wasn't like they said it looked like an ethereal. Well, they said it looked like he kind of described it as an ethereal light. Right. He said it stood up, it was bulky, it ran through the fence. So it passed through the fence. Right. And it ran in a kind of semicircle and then kind of it disappeared. Or they lost sight yet. Yeah. But and then the wife turned round to him, and because it was his wife, him, and the kids in the car, and the kids were younger. And the wife turned round and said, "Did you see that?" And he turned around and said, "Aye." And the kids in the back said, "You've seen the Silverman." That's how they got the name the Silverman. But he said, when I interviewed him, he said it wasn't silver. He said the way I could describe it is like when you look at an old negative picture, like you get like the film and that, and you look at a negative, and it's like that type of whitish grey. Oh, he said that's what it looked like. Wow. And he said, I don't know. He goes, I had this. He said, me and my wife talked about it for weeks after. And he said, I had this. It was more a feeling that it was scowling at us when it was running. He goes, but I can't remember seeing a face. He said, and I don't know how I get that picture in my head where it's scowling at us because it didn't have a face. He goes, it's strange. But he said, the funny thing was after it, he said, I can't remember much after it. He said, I kind of racked my brains with it because I can mind going to work and being a bit, feeling funny about it and feeling kind of a bit withdrawn and all that. And he said, but when I try and rack my brains about what we did and when we got home and all that, he goes, I can't remember. He goes, I can remember. And he goes, he worked in kind of healthcare and stuff, and he done a bit of like self-regression and that. And he was trying to self kind of hypnosis to try and regress to get more detail in it, man. And he can get more detail with events, seeing the thing and stuff like that. He goes, but when he gets round the corner, he said it was like a black screen. He said he couldn't get round it. He said he said maybe get round it with a bit more better sessions of hypnosis with loading it yourself. He said, but I couldn't get round this black screen. He said it was just like it stopped. And he said, I can't remember actually getting home that night. He said, must have got home, obviously. He said, but it's just strange because it was like, kind of, not just that event, he's seen that thing. He said, it was a lot of other things, kind of, it was just like, it was kind of strange after it. But it was quite a funny one, that. And it kind of came home to me is because it was literally like 50 meters or like 50 to 100 meters anyway, away from I had that same feeling. Like you can't see where I was because I went in and I had a good rake about the forest bit, and it was literally you can't see the path for that bit of the road, but when you're on the path in the forest, it's actually quite close to where that bit is. But I never realised that at the time until I actually kind of went in and had a rake about. I was like, that's just there, and it's funny as well because I was telling like my wife about it, and my wife's not really into a lot of this stuff. She kind of believes in that, but she just rather not know. And I was telling her, and she said, "Oh, was that here?" Because I took her in there once, just walking the dog. She goes, "That place is pretty strange." The place up there where it happened is next to. So you've got there's a kind of wee hill bit there, right, and then over for that there's another kind of prominent hill, and it's called Cairn Papel, and that dates back to. It's got like a I think is it a Bronze Age or kind of structure on it. It's got a kind of a mound, and then it's got. It was an actual henge. It was an actual henge, but the henge was made out of timbers, and they've long since gone and stuff like that. And then the Christians came and buried their dead on it and stuff. But there was like burial kind of mound up there and stuff, and it dates back like 5,500 years or something. So that's just adjacent from it. But it's just mad. I mean, all that like the Bathgate Hills. There's been some kind of crazy sightings up there. The things,
Can I just say that story you've just told? I've either heard that before or something very similar, but I couldn't say that it was up in Scotland. But definitely the running in the silver and not being able to see a face.
Yeah,
I've definitely heard that before.
It's a strange one, and somebody recently as well, who hadn't heard that story, had contacted me and said that they thought they'd seen. They said the only way they could describe it was a Bigfoot. Right. I've not even relayed this. I've not relayed this story before. And they said that they can't definitively say that. They said, but they drove by this area. It's on one of the main roads. And it's I'll tell you a bit about the geographic area because there's loads of stuff happened here, right, over the years. If you looked at it in the space of maybe a few years, you wouldn't get a lot. But if you look over a span of a good number of years, there's quite a lot of stuff that's happened over the years. So there's an area called Bangor Hospital. They were driving along the main kind of road, and there's a lot of kind of forestry and stuff. And she said she was driving with her boyfriend. I think they were going to drop them off at work or do something. I can't remember, or go and pick somebody up or something like that or whatever. But she was they were driving along, and she seen something standing in the forest, just at the side of the forest. And it looked kind of bulky. The only way she could describe it was just like a Bigfoot type thing, right? Standing at the side of the road in the forest, and she turned around and she seen it, and she was like rubbernecking to see if she can get a better. So when they got to where they went, and they came back like 10 minutes later, just to see, right, it's probably just the way the tree was, or the way that, or the way it was, it's just a trick of the light or whatever. But it wasn't there, whatever it was. Didn't get a great description there, but she just said there was definitely something standing there. And then when I came back, that thing wasn't there. She was, I kind of rationalised that it was probably a tree, probably the way again, the structure was and all that kind of stuff. But she said when she drove back, the thing wasn't there. Whatever was there the first time. So whatever it was, it could have been anything. You know what I mean? But it's interesting though, because it's only literally, as the crow flies, about 3.5 miles for this other sighting.
Really?
The thing, right? And it's actually so it's about 3.5 miles or 4 miles for the Silverman thing. And then it's actually it's right on the money, about literally half a mile away from it's probably half a mile away from the Bob Taylor sighting. The Bob Taylor UFO kind of abduction that happened in 79 in Scotland happened at that location. Just next to, it wasn't next to the road, it was further in and over the M8, but it was literally about like a stone's throw for it. But I'm just putting all these kind of things together, you know what I mean? So
any ley lines around that area, do you know, or like rivers or anything connecting them?
Yeah, probably. You know what I mean? I've not done. I've not looked into ley lines much in that sense. I know like other researchers have. I mean, but there must be like a lot of kind of different ley lines and stuff like that. Because like I know one of the guys who was discussing when he said there's quite a lot of different ley lines, and you've got just trying to think what else you've got in that area. There must be. I mean, there must be. I mean, there's loads of different structures and stuff like that.
Well, like you said, there used to be an end there as well, and you just got the mound where the burial.
Oh, totally. Aye, that dates back.
Just on its own.
That dates back. That's like the prominent hill in the area, and it dates back about 5,500 years. But there's loads of stuff in there because it goes back like here. I mean, honestly, like some of the stuff, it's the same anywhere, obviously in the UK, right? But we've got like Knights of the Hospital, just in there. It's like, can I say that? Which is just in a town called Turfickin, and you've got like loads of different stuff that happened over the years, and there's loads of castles and all that, and derelict things and all that. I mean, it's like, but I mean, there's been UFO sightings and stuff like that over this vicinity for a good time. I mean, really have been like the Bob Taylor sighting, which is or abduction type story, which was covered by Malcolm Robinson in many books and stuff. And I mean, that was in Livingston in '79. That was kind of one of the main ones of the day, and that got investigated by the police and everything.
Oh right.
Yeah, it totally did, and they believed him and stuff like that. You know, I mean, he if you don't know the story, he basically he came across this UFO. I'll go over it quickly. I mean, he's covered quite a lot of times, but he came across this UFO in a clearing. He was a forestry worker, and he seen this dome-shaped UFO landed within the tree clearing, and these two, the way I think it was described, it looked like a sea mine. These type things came out.
Yes.
It was like a ball, and they kind of rolled towards them, and they had like
I remember that.
Protruding arms, and then he blacked out, and I don't know what they did with him, if they like pulled him into the ship or whatever, but he came to, his trousers and that were all ripped and stuff like that, and he called the police and stuff, and they investigated. They found like indentations in the middle of the forest where like this thing had landed. And there was quite a lot of other things on about it, but it definitely got covered by the police. And I think, if I'm right in saying, I might be totally wrong with this, I'm sure it was like they put it in. It was like assault by unknown persons or something like that. It's been well covered. Malcolm's got a book in it and stuff like that. But it's just like that. So that from the Bathgate Hills is literally 45 miles away, right? So you've got that there. You've got the Silverman kind of story. You've got another like 10 miles the opposite way. You've got the whole Bonnybridge thing going on where it's not just Bonnybridge, it was that whole area, which was, you've got like Falkirk, Stirlingshire, you've got West Lothian, which is all kind of, it's not a massive area, where there was hundreds of UFO sightings right through the 90s. Loads of stuff. One of the interesting ones that I was looking, it was no long after the Silverman one, and then in the winter, going back, I think it was maybe, it was been last winter. I was up taking pictures, and there was a couple walking back for where the Silverman thing was, and I was like walking back to the opposite direction to get my car. And it was getting dark and it'd been snowing. It was pretty deep snow, and I said to them, I said this, and I hadn't been on all the trails in that wee bit of forest. I said, they lead up to the hill, and they said, yeah, if you take that one in there, and we started talking about cameras. They were asking if I get any good pictures and stuff like that, and then they were just talking about cameras, and I made an off-the-cuff remark just to see if they'd heard the story, and I said, I better watch in case it was getting dark at the same time, right? But the light was coming down, the sun had just set, and there's this big prominent stone that stands at the end further away, right? It stands in the middle of the kind of field, so I was trying to get a picture of that with the sun setting on top of it, and so when I was going back, I'd said to them, what was that? I said, I better, that kind of story about following the trail in, and I made an off-cuff remark saying, I better watch in case the Silverman gets me. and made an off-cuff remark like that, and the lady, older lady, kind of turned around and said, "What do you mean?" And she looked at her husband, and I kind of thought like they've seen something, right? And she says, "What do you see? Is it like some like cryptid or something like that?" And I said, "Aye." I said, and I didn't say I'd podcast it then. I said like some guy had seen something years ago along there a wee bit.
Yeah.
And I said, "Have you seen something like?" And they said, "Aye." And they looked at each other, and I kind of thought they were going to tell me about some cryptid story, or something. And they turned around and said, "I was seen like a UFO." And I said, "Well, what was it?" And they said, "Well, in October, this was January. It was January last year. It was like it was pretty deep snow up there. Or was it January last year before? I can't remember. It wasn't long ago anyway." So they basically said they were walking up there because they stay in that area, and they said they were walking up the Bathgate Hills, and they seen it look like a large white sphere, a large white sphere that was not just a light. They said it looked like a white sphere, and it went down behind the hill, the same place where that thing was seen. It's just maybe coincidence, but that's where it was mainly. I'm not saying it disappeared behind the hill, but that's just when it out of sight for them to see it, because obviously the hill line was there. But they said it was like a large white sphere. And people run about where I stay, you get used to what's in the sky. We stay next to, Edinburgh Airport's like 15, 20 miles to the east there. So you know what a plane is, you know what a helicopter is. I mean, they're no crazy people. So like they'd seen this white sphere, and they said, "Okay, it went down there, but we couldn't see any more of it." And there's been other reports up in that area where somebody'd seen the same type of thing, but they said it looked like it had mercury going round about it. Like a kind of like a light or a mercury going about it, and it links in with the same thing that Andrew Swan had seen. He said he'd seen something in the sky, and it was a bright white light or kind of sphere. He said he took a video of it and he sent me it. He said it doesn't really do it any justice with the video because it was on an iPhone.
It never does though, does it?
It's just a white light, and you could see a light. He said, but it looked like there was something going round it, and it travelled for a good bit, and then it went away down that neck of the woods.
Right.
And so. The interesting thing with that is, and I said, that's quite my story, and I said, look, and the guy then said, "That's not all I've seen." And I said, "What else have you seen?" And it was just kind of like an outpouring of stuff that they'd seen. I was like, "This is amazing." So the guy said, when I was younger, he said when I was younger, I'd seen. I'm not getting to lay any names or anything like that because I've not really got the permission to go delve into the stories and stuff because they never came back to us. But he just said when I was younger, I'd seen a UFO, and when it was, I think he was either like 6 or 7 or something, which was in the same area as the Bob Taylor incident. Not the same type of UFO, but it was in that area. It was 2 years prior.
Yeah.
And then, so he went on to see that. He also said he'd seen like a large black triangle in the Bathgate area in 2015, like a massive triangle in the sky. And he said, "I don't know how nobody else seen this because it was absolutely huge. It was a really, really like large triangle." And his wife had seen like an orb. Said it basically came out the clouds and came down, and she kind of looked it out the window. She seen it, and she said it was kind of like the thing knew I'd seen it, and it went back up, and disappeared.
Yeah, it become aware.
Aye, she was that's it, and she said, I think there's like only certain people can see these things.
Yeah,
and I said, I think you're right, and I said, look, I need to get these stories off you, and explained that I was doing the podcast and stuff, and all that, and then and when I was going away, the guy said, "That's no all. It's not all there is to the story. There's more to it." And I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "When I was younger, there's a bit more to it." Because after I came home, he goes, he basically tried. He seen the UFO. He tried to. The other kids playing. He tried to get this wee kid to come and see it, but he didn't know what it was, and he just laughed and ran away. And he got his older brother. By the time he got his older brother, the thing was away. And he said, but that night he fell ill and ended up in hospital. And he attributed something to do with that.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to it. I said, like, I need to get these stories off you and stuff. And I gave him my email address and stuff, and they never got in contact. I was just like, no.
It's awful like when you lose a grip on the.
So I walked the Bathgate Hills until I found him walking again, and I met him again, and he told me more stories and stuff. But he said, look, he just wasn't comfortable coming on the line and story. I said, I appreciate that. It's fine. Yeah. You know what I mean? But he told me a few more things and stuff. It was quite mad. But it's just interesting who you bump into just off the chance.
Random, you just say one word and it's like, oh.
You didn't really go for that. He sat there for 4 days waiting to see him.
It was funny because like the time I actually did see them, I kind of thought I was just going walks up there and stuff because it was quite I mean, there's over the years, there's been lots of stuff kind of see that neck of the woods. So I thought I'll just have a walk. I'm trying to take a bit of like Paul Sinclair's bit, get out and actually get out and about and stuff. And so I was, when I went up, I usually go up as well, take a camera. If there's like any good pictures of the sunset, I'll try and get them and stuff. Yeah. Just maybe for an excuse to, so then I look like a total weirdo just walking.
It's like taking a dog.
I've got a dog now, so I don't look like a total weirdo.
I have to buy a dog to go for walks on my own.
So I've got a dog now, so I used to do that. But I went up there, like, I kind of got up, and then it ended up like there was a hare came in off the East Coast, and it ended up it was just total cloud cover. I mean, so it was like really, really dense fog, and I bumped into them at the top of the hill. It was just mad. It was just like, and I seen them, so they told me a bit more stories, which one of them was quite interesting because I'd only ever heard that once before. And the guy said to us, he goes, look, the funny thing was that although he'd seen UFOs and stuff like that, and he had a lot of experiences, he never believed in any other paranormal stuff. He never believed in like things like ghosts or a lot of strange stuff and things like that. And then when he was in his house, he said there was like a few strange things happened. And I can't remember the stories of what he delayed with his wife, but he basically said that it was like money would just drop out the sky and in the house. He said there was one time where he heard like it was like a slapping sound, and it was like money. It was like a coin. It was either like a 1 or 2 pence piece or whatever it was. It just landed. It just came out. It was landing the kitchen floor or whatever. But didn't he land and roll about? It just like slapped on the floor. It just appeared. And he said another one happened, and it was somewhere else in the house. And the only other place I'd heard that is one of Paul's accounts where the guys work in the garage when things would come out the air and that. That's the only other place I'd heard that before. So I just found it quite interesting. But totally. So that was the kind of accounts, just be starting the podcast and stuff like that, and then there's like more stuff came in. I mean, there's a multitude of different stories in there that just come in, all the time. But some of the ones myself. Sorry, and you go.
I was just going to say we'll take a 2-minute break and we'll come back to that, and then we'll cover any questions that anybody's sent.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you carry on with that story, and then we'll jump on the questions in the second half. Is that all right with you, Chris?
Yeah, it's cool.
2-minute comfort break.
Go and stretch me back.
Don't disappear.
See you in a minute. See you in 2.
And we're back in the room.
Hello.
Right,
can I just jump in on one thing quickly before I forget?
Yeah.
Right. a couple of people have asked me, so the stickers that we do, the car stickers, for them to be shipped to America only costs £4. So if you used to buy it, it costs £10 or whatever the equivalent is in dollars. So anyone in the States listening, if you do want one, I can send them over, but it'll cost $15 if you want the two, or $10 if you just want the one. So yeah, or something thereabouts. I've got to mention it on Wednesday.
Hazard a guess, Andy. It's fine.
Yeah, so around about that. That's it. Carry on.
Yes. Carry on. Where did we get to, Chris?
Right. So where was I? Yeah. So going to some of the other kind of accounts that I've had. So the podcast, but I was actually going through some of the chronological stories, maybe my own, and this was just maybe things that I was trying to rack my brains about anything I kind of thought was odd about when I was younger, or some of the stories, and when you start compiling them together, you rationalise a lot of different stuff, and we all do it all the time, and people things will happen, and you're just so, it was probably this, or it was probably that, and you didn't hold on to it because we're all busy and whatever. But when you actually start digging in and having a wee look about, and there was one, I know you kind of asked about it, the one with the red orb. Can you spoke about that before?
Yeah.
So before the red orb, there was one. I'll kind of do it chronologically. So when I was younger, before the actual kind of the dread feeling thing, right? Actually, before that, when I was about, I must have been about I'd say probably 19-ish, 19, 20-ish, or around about that age anyway. And I used to get sleep paralysis, all the time. Like I had it solid for about, I'd reckon around about that time. I'd say it must have been 18-ish, 18, 19, 20, around about that time. And I reckon for about a year and a half to 2 years, I had sleep paralysis. Wow. And I must have had it at the time. I just chalked it up to sleep paralysis, basically just being too tired, or and things like that, right? But I stayed with one friend, who basically I moved into a room in his house. It was in a town further over, right? So it was a town further over, and it's funny how some of these things tie into other stories as well when you look into it. So it was a few towns over where I stay, and he said in the house he had ghostly things happening and stuff like that, because he stayed the property of his parents and that beforehand. When he got the house after them, he took it off them, but there was nothing happening. I was there, right? But I can remember my first time I had sleep paralysis, and I can remember the last time I had sleep paralysis, and I can remember a lot of instances right through the whole process. But the first time I had it, it comes with the same feeling as probably most when most people get sleep paralysis. It comes with the kind of panic feeling, the dread feeling, the feeling like somebody else is in the room with you, and it's possibly maybe doing a bit of panic that you can't move. You could rationalise it as that, but at the same time, it's funny you get these kind of feelings with it. So I was sitting actually upright watching TV, and I must have dozed off or whatever, and I woke up and I could see the TV and I could see it was on, and in peripheral vision over here, I thought there was somebody there, but I couldn't turn my neck to look. And it was just being that sitting there, and for I don't know for how long, but and then eventually coming out it, and the panic and that kind of wearing off because you're actually got control of your body again.
Did you feel like you were pinned to the bed at the time, or
I was upright in a chair, so I was sitting in a settee watching TV, and I must have dozed off. So when I woke up, I was watching. So I must have dozed off. I woke up, and then I could still see the TV on. That was in front of me. I could see it. It was on. It was moving and stuff. But I couldn't out my peripheral vision here. I intensely thought there was somebody there, right? And that's just the feeling you get with sleep paralysis. So I tried to turn my head, couldn't turn my head round, and then eventually I got back to the motor function back in my body again, and then you come out it, and it's like, God, that's mad, right? So, and that was kind of quite a lot of what happened, quite a lot of the time. So it happened there quite a lot, and I was only there for maybe 6 months to a year, and it would happen. I mean, this would happen to me every 2 weeks, right? Easy. I mean, I'd probably have it. I would say it would easily happen once a month, probably. Even sometimes it was maybe more. It was like once a week. Sometimes it was like every 2 weeks. But I'd probably have it if I was going to average it out over the space of a year and a half to 2 years. I had it about every roughly. I'd have it twice a month anyway, easy.
Yeah.
And it was quite. I'd get it quite a lot. So I had it there. I then moved house. And I stayed in my other friend's house. But this house where I stayed, it was the first one it happened in, was a few towns over, right? And that was I can remember the first time it happened. So when I moved to my other friend's house, I rented a room out his house, and then I ended up getting it there. And when I moved into this guy's house, he had this older room. It needed a lot of decorating done to it. So being a plasterer, I mean, I tidied it up, painted it, and all that kind of stuff, and furnished it and stuff. And it was quite a nice room. And so I stayed in there, and it used to happen to me there all the time as well. So to the point sometimes where I would be getting up, and it feels like you're getting pushed back down again. Right. So you'd actually be getting up, and it feels like somebody's pushing you in the chest, and you're getting pushed back down again. Never ever seen anything anytime it happened, right? Apart from like the very last time. Yeah. So that happened quite a lot. I mean, to the point where I used to even sleep with the light on and stuff like that. And it spooked you out. You know what I mean? With this happening, I told the guy that I shared the house with, and he didn't believe me. He just thought I was full of crap. And I was trying to explain to him. I said, "No, this happens. I mean, this is nuts." And I just at the time I just chalked it up to overtiredness or whatever, right? Yeah. So it happened in that property, and then so it happened in that first property. It happened in that other property, and that was the only two properties that happened in, right? And then my mother stayed down south before she died. She stayed down south. Like she kind of moved up here and went down south. So I was going to go down and visit her, and I was going to go down and stay down there for a wee bit. So the last time this happened, before I was getting the bus down there or whatever else, I was in seeing my sister, and I stayed at my sister's house, which is in the same town. Yeah. And I slept in a settee that night. And it happened in there, right? That was the very, very last time it happened. And so it happened right through that time for about a year and a half to 2 years, right? About every 2 weeks, roughly, let's say that. Yeah. And then to the point where you're getting pushed down, you feel like the point where you can breathe, but you can't scream. You can actually hear your vocal cords going like that, but you can't actually voice anything. Yeah. And I was sleeping in the settee in my sister's house before I went down south. And if you can imagine, there was I'm looking out, I'm sitting in the settee across the living room. There's a large window. Yeah. There's a set of blinds in the window, which are closed. And then there's a set of curtains. And the curtains are ajar slightly, maybe about a gap about 400 mil, roughly. Yeah. And you can see the outside light shining through. So you can see the orange tinge of the street light shining through that gap. Right. Yeah. And so I'm lying in the settee, and I'm the kind of person that will try and rationalize quite a lot of things, but sometimes you just can't. So I was sleeping in the settee, kind of side on, right, lying on my side, and I was looking over, and I must have actually been asleep or whatever, or closed my eyes, and I could see the light shining through that gap. So it was like the rest of the room's dark. You've got a bit in the middle, which is basically a lighter kind of tingy orange, if not kind of a whiter tingy orange. Yeah. And then there was somebody standing there, right? So just black, right? Yeah. Total black standing there. I couldn't see any features at all apart from I knew it was a woman, because I could see, well, either that it was a man with long hair, right? But to me, in my head, it looked like the outline of a woman. It was standing there in that gap in the window. And so I was lying kind of facing that. I could see it because I could see the hair. Yeah. But it was just black though. I mean, I couldn't see any of the features, probably because of the fact that the room was dark and the light was coming from behind me regardless. So I can't say it was just totally black, absorbing light or anything like that. It was just dark because it was dark, and the fact that I couldn't see. It was pretty dark though, but you couldn't see in because the light was coming from the back here. Yeah. And it came towards me, and then it kneeled down in front of my face, and then it disappeared. Oh. And that was it. It was, but that's the very, very last time I had sleep paralysis. Yeah. And I never really told anybody that story, and just until I started doing this, I kept that. I never even told my sister. I never told anybody. And I kept that to myself. And it was only until I started doing this and got a bit more comfortable about actually telling some things that I told that. And the sleep paralysis, all that right through. But the strange thing with that story is my friend who never believed me in the house I stayed in before.
Yeah.
He moved into the room I was in because it was nicely decorated.
Yeah.
And it started happening to him. And he told me that years after. He said that started happening to me, to the point where I felt like getting pushed back down for the back and stuff like that.
To me, that isn't like classic sleep paralysis, because I've had that once where I was laid on my front and I looked at the clock and then I saw the time and I was thinking, I need to go to the loo. It was something past 3 a.m. Thought I need to go to the loo, and as I went to move to turn over, I was like, it was like a heavy bloke was laid on top of me. And it was like pushing all the air out of my lungs. And I could just take shallow breaths, and I kept looking and watching the clock move. And eventually I managed to like kind of throw it off. But I had a friend whose boyfriend used to have sleep paralysis, and he didn't remember anything about it. This is what's different between us two and him.
Yeah.
He didn't remember anything about it. He used to lay in bed making screaming motions, but nothing coming out. But he couldn't remember it the next day. Whereas you remember all of them.
Yeah.
And I couldn't remember that one. Yeah. And I remember watching the clock turning as you were watching the telly.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's sleep paralysis. I think that's some entity.
The mad thing with it is that it only happened it happened mainly in the 2 properties, right?
Yeah.
And then the last property was my sister's house, which was the very, very last time it happened. And then and it only happened for that space of time. It was like it all happened at the same time over the space of about a year and a half. It wasn't like a year and a half here and there. It was like about a year and a half to 2 years.
Yeah.
And I moved away after that and it stopped. I've never had that again.
No.
Since that time.
To me,
if I have, I've never known about it. But the other mad thing as well, which is I'd say probably a synchronicity or just a coincidence, was when I was interviewing the guy about the Silverman. He told me about a lot. He said a lot of strange things happened to him, and he said he relayed like a lot of different stories. He kind of got involved in the UFO scene a wee bit after it as well and stuff. And he said that a lot of strange things happened to him when he was younger in an area he stayed just outside Bathgate. And he said it was like it happened to him when he was younger. He went missing for a while when he was like quite at an early age.
Right.
And then eventually got found early hours in the morning. He said he was just playing in a digger. He said he could see it was almost like, describe the story. I'm not podcasting it. I basically just edited it and just done the Silverman story. But one of this one, it seemed like a screen memory. So he had been missing. He said he was only 4 or 5 or 5. I think it was 5-ish or something. And he was just going along the shop, which wasn't too far away.
Yeah.
And he seen this shiny digger. So there's this kind of wee quarry bit. So he kind of went near to have a look, and he was standing on it and playing it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's all I can remember. And then he lost, like, I can't remember like the exact hourage, but let's say this happened during the day at 2 o'clock, like whatever. They didn't find him until like early hours in the morning. Right. And then all he can remember was just playing in this digger. Right. And then on and run about it and stuff like that. And then he can't remember much else. But he said in this vicinity, this place is where his experiences started. And he said and there's been other kind of sightings in this area as well, which basically this bit he stays, it skirts round the hill, right? So if you can imagine, you've got the prominent hill in the middle where like the henge and all that kind of stuff was like Cairn Papel, and then you've got the Silverman account was and all that. So about a mile for that, just on the kind of edge, it's still in the hill. It's like kind of on the hill. It's about a mile for it basically where this bit is, right? Where he stayed. Right. And so when I went back to the coincidence bit for me is it wasn't until I twigged actually after that, but when the sleep paralysis started for me in that house, it was the exact same street where this happened to him. And it was it was literally like about 150 metres down the road where he stayed. Really? I mean, in that kind of row of houses. I was like, that's nuts. I can mind you looking at it and I could go, I was like, I was just double checking. I was like, I was like, that's nuts. Yeah. So it's mad how they just kind of tie in. I mean, you could again from it, not I mean, but it was strange for me because that's where some of the experiences started for me, where the sleep paralysis in that place, and he said a lot of kind of strange things happened when he stayed there. And I can remember my friend telling me a story about when he stayed there, where I'm sure there was something where somebody had been pushed down the stairs. It was like something had pushed them down the stairs, or pushed somebody down the stairs. That's why he said like his house was haunted and stuff. But I never experienced anything there apart from the sleep paralysis. But but the guy that had the same story, he said there was something that happened to him and his family when he stayed along the same bit, where there was like something like that as well. I think one of his kids or something like that. But he experienced a lot of kind of strange stuff in that area. Also, things we've seen in that area as well. There's been like black cats and all that kind of stuff. And things like that. Numerous signs. But that's, at the end of the day, I would just normally chalk that up just to wild black cats. You don't know what it could be. You know what I mean? But I mean, there's a lot of kind of strange stuff happened in that. And it's funny when you go back and you try and remember everything and you're looking at that's one of the things where the sleep paralysis stuck in my mind for ages. I never forgot about that. It wasn't something I had to like dig up a memory. It was like I remembered it wholly, but I just never ever talked about it before because you just didn't want to be that guy who looked like nuts or whatever. So
once you start talking about stuff like that, you find it easier to do because people are going, "Oh, I've had something like that," and then it kind of gets easier to talk about your own stuff.
So I never really talked about a lot, and I'm not saying I've not had. Apart from like the family encounters with that thing, I mean, I never seen it with mum and dad. You know what I mean, so I've not seen loads of stuff myself or anything like that, and I'm not saying I've seen X, Y, and Z. There are a few things.
Just while you're on about that, there's a comment from Pat. In my experience, I will put it down to a concentration of negative dark energy, Chris.
Potentially, yeah.
I noticed that pop up.
So I was kind of. It was funny as well because I can remember when Skinwalker Ranch was on. The actual Skinwalker Ranch, the first kind of show when it was on, just before lockdown, I think, and it clicked a memory for me as well. And it was, and I said the only other person that knew about that story was my wife. And my wife, as I said, she doesn't. I wouldn't say she's a non-believer. She probably believes in some stuff, but she's no into this type of subject. She just rather know. I mean, it's probably just a theory, no one to know, and that's it. You know what I mean? So she's doesn't want to hear about it, or it's just she'd rather know what's there. As simple as that. So she just said to me, like, "Didn't bring it home with you."
Don't film me.
So just don't bring it in home. That's it. Don't bring your work home.
No attachment this way.
Keep the hitchhikers away. So one of the mad ones was, so I was watching that, and they were talking about, and I read the book in that, and I kind of, I read like George Knapp's book like years ago, and then I watched the Skinwalker Ranch show, and they were talking about some of the older bits that happened in Skinwalker, going back when it was when the people, I can't remember, was it the
Native Americans,
when they had the ranch before they actually Bigelow had it and stuff.
Oh
like that.
yes, yeah.
So,
I can't remember.
I think their name was Gorman.
Yes.
So there was during that kind of process, maybe even when Bigelow and that were there with Bass and stuff like that. They'd see orbs and stuff, right? Or the family had seen orbs, like large orbs, and different coloured large orbs and stuff like that. But they said sometimes they'd also see small red orbs, like very, very, very small red orbs, in about the cattle. And the thing where, and they talked about that, and I could remember watching it, and it just totally sparked a memory. And I was like, I've seen that. And I said to the wife, "Can you remember that?" I goes, "Did I ever tell you about I've seen that?" And she goes, "Remember?" She goes, "You never stopped talking about it for about 6 months." Right? and I can't even remember it. I mean, for that period of time, it must have happened. Maybe it was something like, let's say 12 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And then I remembered it for that time. She said, "I never stopped talking about it for 6 months," and then forgot about it for like 12 years. And then that just triggered that memory.
Yeah.
So what happened is, I've done a lot of like triathlon, running and stuff like that, and training and cycling and stuff. And when I stayed back in my hometown again, when I stayed there, the place where the weird thing happened in the house, no, in that house though, it was like a kind of new house, and at the back of the town, south of the town, there's a cycle path that just runs through over the town. It's like, look, if you can imagine, it's like in between Edinburgh and Glasgow, and there's like lots of farmland, but there's like small mining towns everywhere. After the area, so you've got this cycle path. It used to be an old railway line. There's a new railway line being in its place now, but you've got a cycle path that basically runs Edinburgh to Glasgow, and it runs through all these towns. So you can go running in it and jogging in it and stuff like that. And I would just run at night, and I would just run pitch black without a head torch and stuff like that, and run, or sometimes have a small head torch on. The only time we used to wear a torch is just so like cars could see me. But if it was light enough at night with the moon or whatever, I would normally I could just run without one. But I was either running away without a torch on, or I've had this small torch, the old type LEDs. With the wee diodes that don't actually shine much of light, so it only maybe shines up about like a metre in front of you. It's not like the very, very strong ones you get now, it'll totally blind you. Right? It's like a small kind of rubbishy one. So out running, you basically run and you get to the edge of the town, and then you're just fields and a wee bit of forestry until you get to the next town, which is about 2 miles away. And I came out the town, and it was like getting dark, pretty dark, and you could still see stuff though. Right, I could see the wee bit of path in front of me. If you look over to the left, there was like a large field, and you could see the fence posts, which would maybe a different shade of darkness. Right, you could see gorse bushes, which was maybe like a darker shade of black, and the rest of it maybe a wee bit grey in the background and stuff. So you could discern what was there, and you could see stuff. And far away in the field, there was a red light. Right, it looked like a red LED, and being a runner and stuff like that, the first thing I thought it was, oh no, that's a dog, right, with an LED in its collar.
Yeah.
And that's the first instinct I thought. I didn't think, well, goodness, an orb or whatever. I didn't even think anything like that then as well. So I was still running, and I turned around and I seen it, and it was running to intercept me across the field, right?
Yeah.
So when I was looking at it, it was bounding across the field, right? This thing, and I kind of thought, in that field usually there's cattle in that field, right? So it's like it's a field that's usually kept for cattle and stuff, and there's plenty of paths about, so you wouldn't need to be out there. And it was late at night, so I used to do my work and then kind of run at night and stuff. So it was like maybe 9:30, 10 at night in the winter. So it was pretty dark. So to be in the middle of a field, be a dog loose, it's not unheard of, right? But usually there's lots of paths that you would probably go on and not go in the farmer's field. Yeah. So this thing was running to intercept me, and all I kept thinking about, I hope the gate at the bottom's locked, because I just don't want to attack the dog. Right, so I'm running, and the path's slightly elevated to the field, right? Yeah. So this thing comes, and red LED, and it's running parallel with me when I'm running along the path. It's maybe 5 to 10 meters away from me. No far. It's just like there. Yeah. And it's weaving in and out the gorse bushes. So it goes behind the gorse bushes, it goes in front of the gorse bushes, goes behind, goes in front, goes through. So it's definitely kind of going through, and it's bounding there. Yeah. And then I run up and I get to the gate, and the gate's locked, and the thing is just still there, and it goes behind a bush. Yeah. And I kind of slow, and all this time I'm straining to hear, right? I'm straining to hear somebody shouting a dog or somebody to call it back, right? Because it's ran with me for the good part of probably 3/4 mile. Right, this lasted for like, it was like, so I measured it and stuff, and it probably lasted for a good like 3.5 minutes or something, or whatever, right? For this, a wee bit, maybe a bit longer, but it followed me for that kind of length of time. And I turned around, and it basically disappeared behind the bush, and I was listening, I couldn't hear nothing. Yeah, and I kind of like, it was just one of the ones where I was like, I couldn't hear nothing, I couldn't see the thing, and I was starting to think, and I was like, I couldn't really see a dog. I didn't see a dog. I mean, I just presumed it was a dog, but I never seen a dog. And I just seen this red light, and that's all I seen. And I ran, and I was thinking back when I was looking down, I could see the fence post at a different shade of darkness. I could see everything else. I couldn't see any shape running. I couldn't see anything apart from this red light. And then I basically I ran to the next town, and then ran along the street so I could come back the street. I wasn't brave enough to go back.
I'd have got a taxi back.
But that was it. I was like, I went home and I told the wife, and the thing, it struck a chord with me totally, because I never ran again then at night. And I bought a big torch, a torch that beamed the light. That was the very, very first thing I did. I bought a torch. I just bought a torch that was like it beamed the light, and it was like a prominent, again, strong light. Yeah. And I could remember, I was looking back in eBay to see if what the date was when I bought it, but I couldn't go back that far. Right. But, it was mad, and it struck a chord because I'd what do you call it? I've seen that, just a small story, and then since then I've seen it in another book as well, where somebody else has seen this exact same thing.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying it. You could probably rationalise that it could have been a dog, and then somebody's let a dog loose at that time, right? But I never seen a dog. That's a strange thing. I never really seen it, but I never relayed that to anybody. I told the wife about it, and just I just rationalised it, and then just moved on for it. That was it, really. So.
I think Andy's got a question.
Yeah, well, it's more of what you're saying about Skinwalker Ranch. I've been chatting to a guy who lives about 20 miles away from there, and he's got these. He lives in an apartment block, and he's got all these orbs that moving about. He sent me a couple of videos, and they've actually got their own movement. So you know, if it does, it just keeps swirling about.
Yeah.
But these will stop and change direction. And there's like 2 or 3 of them at a time. And one of the pictures he sent me, they're all multicoloured. It's like someone's got, so it's like a black background. He's used different colour on it. And it's like someone's got luminous markers and done red, blue, green, yellow. And they're all. I sent you the picture, didn't I, Deb?
Yeah.
And he lives about 20 miles away from Skinwalker.
That whole area is. I mean, there's these
areas. Just said there's so much going on. It's unbelievable.
But these areas are everywhere, and that's the thing. It's like you've got there's different areas, like obviously doing Yorkshire and stuff like that. The amount of stuff you get down there.
Yeah.
There's areas here where as I was saying, you take a snapshot of this area for the amount of stuff that's happened over the years. Where if you look at it over the space of a few years, there's still sightings. In fact, I mean, there's one of the guys that I know, one of the paranormal groups, is investigating a sighting a couple of days ago, where a good few people have seen a UFO in the sky.
Yeah.
And there's still things getting sighted all the time. And but over here, the amount of kind of strange stuff that's happened over the years just within this area. I mean, it's like you've got the UFOs, for example, the abduction case, the Bob Taylor thing. That was like one of the strong, prominent cases investigated. Yeah. You've got the A70 case, which happened. 2 guys got abducted on the A70. Malcolm Robinson's got a book out this year about it as well. Yeah. That was a strong case. At the same time, the Black Triangle story happened.
Yeah,
that one we were talking about. And the reason it had been covered before by some investigators, but the reason that I didn't want to go and cover all ground that people are covered. But at the same time, the only reason I'll talk about some of these accounts and briefly is mainly because to give people an idea of what's in this area. And what's been over in this area over the years, because you're talking like from me to now, the Bob Taylor case is literally that was about 7 or 8 miles that way.
Yeah,
the Armadale Triangle case, which is quite a prominent case we'll talk about a wee bit, which is only 5 miles that way. The whole UFO flap is like 10 or even 10 miles that way. A70 about 15, 18 miles that way. The case, and they're all like really, really prominent cases of things that happen.
Got a hot spot going on.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
Sorry, I'll quickly show you these pictures. This is just 9 of them. I've just had a quick look. I've got 17 in total. So I'll try and do it so you can't.
They're all the different orbs.
Oh, that's bright. That's bright. Like, I didn't expect that.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. They're like luminous.
Aye.
I'm guessing it's legit with what he's sent me and what he's told me and everything else going on. But it's like even. I'll get a close up on a couple of them.
No, it's like self-illuminating now.
Yeah.
So you can see inside. It's not like a
really strange.
Not reflective.
So he's seen these inside his house.
These are his photos. These are what he's taken in his apartment. So I think that's one of the better ones. And it's black and white.
Mm-hmm.
But
that is really weird.
That's not dust. Don't care what anyone says.
No.
No, that's not like that's not like the ones I've seen, like the ones people usually post up, but it's like a dust particle.
Yeah,
it's just water vapor or dust particles.
Yeah, it's just solid colour.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just reminds me of lightsaber. I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, it does.
It's like purple, blue, white, orange, red, and green.
Mm-hmm. No, that's quite mad.
Mad.
Yeah. So,
right, we'll have a question, otherwise people are going to moan that we haven't asked the questions. So the first one's from Rick Allen. What does Chris think about Nessie?
It's a strange one. I mean, I'm a mega strong believer in Nessie. I'm not sure. I'm kind of on the fence with it, to be honest with you. I've been up there a few times and that. I wouldn't say I don't think I'd waste my time go Nessie hunting, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's
It
no my cup of
intrigues
tea.
me.
It does intrigue me. People have seen things. I mean, so there's definitely something there.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what does intrigue me in that area as well, where you've got no way to diverse for the question, but I mean, believing wise in that, I'm kind of on the fence with it. I mean, I'm yet to be convinced. I mean, as I say, I'm a skeptical believer, so I've not been convinced of much evidence that something's there yet. Because some of the evidence has been there over the years.
Yeah.
Some of it's been debunked, some of it's not been debunked, so it's hard to say. But I think there's other recent tests that they can do to actually with the water testing and that, and maybe find out what's in there and that, which is going to probably happen, or maybe happen. What they find interesting for up that area though is it was interesting enough at Alistair Crowley.
Boleskine House.
I had a place up there. And if you actually look at where Boleskine was as well, just in that area and outside that over kind of lying area is a geomagnetic anomaly, which sits in that as well, in that area. It's not a massive one, but if you look in the area with the geomag kind of data, there's an anomaly. It just kind of sits. It sits at a high kind of area where Boleskine and the other kind of areas is overlying with that, which I kind of found interesting in that as well, because you always get phenomena linked to these areas, which has got like high geomagnetic, and it's like I find that quite interesting. I mean, it's hard to find it. Like you do find some correlation with it and stuff, and even no far for that as well. You've got the Nessie thing. You've then got the Ben McDoo thing. So you've got like the big grey man at Ben McDoo. So from Loch Ness and Boleskine, literally about 25, 30 miles as the crow flies, you've got Ben McDoo. Yeah. And then in that area as well, you've got a lot of weird stuff up there. When you actually look into Ben McDoo over the years, what interested me quite a lot of Ben McDoo as well is you've got Ben McDoo where there were sightings gone back to the late 1800s and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've got the book about it. I got so far through it.
Let's see, in fact.
There you go.
Yes, that's the one. I've got it on my Kindle, so it's different. But
so it's interesting though when you look at Arthur Gray's book, for the fact that he got this dossier for somebody else on accounts, and the accounts he put in the book were accounts that he thought were kind of worthy to go in there. There was a lot more accounts. I'd like to get my hand in the dossier. You know what I mean? Because there was a lot of other stuff that he'd found out about that wasn't in the book.
Yeah.
And because it was like the ones he put in the book was prominent climbers and stuff like that.
Yes.
So in that whole area though, you've got that going on. You've got people seeing the thing.
Yeah.
People hearing footsteps and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
People getting the dread feeling and stuff. People hearing music and stuff.
Yeah.
And like in other bits of the land. If you go across with Ben McDoo, the prominent hill across with Ben McDoo is called Devil's Point.
Yeah.
So it used to be called the Devil's Penis, right? Ignoring the thing, you're right. But, and then the name was changed. So it was called, there's a Gaelic name for it, but it was translated the Devil's Penis or whatever.
Right.
So it was changed in the early 1900s. And that was attributed to a lot of strange phenomena as well. And these places are called things like this for a reason. You know what I mean? When you get like the devils or name involved in it and stuff like that for some reason. But that whole bit is it's just quite strange. I'm going to do a wee bit of digging into that at some point. But even if you go back into the 60s and stuff, and it still goes on, I think it's called the Ethereum Society or something. It was like a kind of UFO cult.
Yeah.
They did what do you call it, pilgrimages to another adjacent hill to Ben McDoo, which is up there as well. So it's a bit of digress for the question and essay, but I just found that area quite interesting. What's there?
Right, Andy, your go.
Yeah. So next question is from Umbra Man. What was the last phenomena seen personally by you, Chris?
By me? God, I've not seen a lot. I reckon the last thing I'd seen. Oh, in fact, no. This was pretty recent, to be honest. I was actually going to say probably the red light, but one of the strangest things that I'd seen recently, and I hadn't seen a lot at all apart from the stories I told you, which were. There's another story where I seen like a thing in the sky, right? But it was just about the size of satellite. But I'll tell you that in a wee minute.
Yeah.
The thing with the red light. Seeing that, you could have rationalised that in something else. in the house I'm in now, my youngest was saying that he was seeing like black things at the side of his eye and stuff like that, and things like that. And with all the kind of stuff that I look into and whatever, I just kind of kept an eye on it and didn't really. You're not going to obviously say to your kid it could be this, it could be that, or whatever. So just you put it down to it could be a trick of the light, or it could be this, and it could be that. And he said he was waking up and he was seeing stuff, and he sleeps his light on all the time, and his door open. His room's across from us, and he has to be like that all the time.
Yeah.
And but he's, I mean, petrified in the dark, and there's been nothing that's made him like that. But I mean, he really is. If he's in light off, he's petrified.
Yeah.
So one of the strange things I'd seen, it was about 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago. I'm thinking the date correctly, and I was sitting in the living room, and I was watching TV, and I've got if you can imagine, I've got a living and dining room, and the kitchen's joined on. It's like an L shape. So when you go into the living room, it's like a big double door. It's not a double door. It's just like open, kind of coming through, but size like kind of double door. Yeah. So I'm sitting on the settee watching the TV, and that opening's behind me.
Right.
So I can, if I reach my hand back like that, I'd be able to grab the side of the opening. All right. Yeah. So I'm sitting on the edge of the couch, and I was sitting watching TV or something, and I'd forgot to do something. It was either to turn the tumble dryer off or to turn the cooker off or so. I can't remember what the thing was, but I had to turn something off or do something. And it just popped in my head. I need to do that. And I grabbed the side of the opening, and I just swung myself around into the kitchen, right, and the kitchen pretty fast. And as I done it, there was something black right in front of me blocking out the light for the kitchen. I mean, like there was something there. I mean, definitely there. And to the point, I actually apologised. I thought it was my wife. I honestly, I spun round and I said, "Oh, sorry," and I was just like, and I kind of stepped back a bit, and I stopped, and then I walked forward, and I had one side of my head just basically saying that was just like a trick of the light, and the other side of my head saying, "I've caught you." For some reason, that's kind of what I had in my head, and I just basically put it out of my mind, and I never really spoke it until it was like later on. I relayed it in another podcast. I was talking about it on this. But that was a strange one. I mean, you could rationalise that as something else, right? It could be a trick of light. Could have been something wrong with my eyes at the time, but there was something there that blocked that light to the point where I thought it was a person. I apologised. I mean, I actually did apologise. I was like, "Oh, sorry," and I was like, "That was nuts."
Yeah, I've done that.
But going into the kind of the before that, and this actually happened well before the red light thing. We were out fishing. And people have seen loads of things like this, I mean, but we've seen like a satellite type thing, and it was moving through the sky, and we all kind of, one of you said, I don't know if it was me or somebody else said, "I wonder what it's going to do when it hits that star." So it was coming up towards a star. No, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to pass by it. Like it got to that star, and it just done basically a 90-degree turn, like totally 90-degree turn, and just kept going the other way. Wow. Absolutely nuts. So we were watching it, and it went across like that, across the sky, and just totally turned the direction. So it was like going that way, and it just went that way.
Straight across, like a right angle.
Same speed, right angle. Aye. But as soon as it hit that star, though, it was funny saying that. Aye. So we're out camping and seen it, but that wasn't too far from the hometown and stuff like that as well.
Yeah. Aye. That's a bit mad. We've got a question from South Coast Anorak. Evening all. Happy birthday, Debs. Thank you very much. Possible question for later. Chris, where would you say the areas of highest strangeness are in Scotland? Best wishes, Rich.
I would definitely say, well, round about this area, there's stuff round about this area, West Lothian and like the Falkirk area and stuff like that. Yeah. A lot of strange stuff goes on over the years. And then where I was mentioning up the Ben McDo, you know what I mean? Yeah. So things like that. I mean, there's quite a lot of places. Like I've not been doing a lot of kind of like stuff like ghost research or anything like that, or podcast. Don't get me wrong, people come on and talk about stuff like that, but you kind of I'm not saying stick to what you know, but it's kind of just what maybe you've been into or whatever. I'd say it's always been kind of more UFO stuff and things like that, or just strange stuff. But definitely this area is for one, and then like Ben McDo up the Cairngorm, stuff like that. There's a lot of strange stuff kind of happens up there. Yeah, definitely.
Right, Andy's gone to sleep.
No, I'm looking. Right, so Paul Tucker's asking, is anyone in the Scottish government taking the subject seriously? Do you know?
I'll be honest. I don't know the answer to that. You know yourself, the British government now on this subject they've just not been that great with it at all.
Yeah.
But I take it you're talking about the UFO disclosure and stuff like that. Is that what we're talking about?
I'm guessing so. Yeah.
Aye.
Yeah.
Know that I know it.
Right.
There was. I did actually think about that to see where it goes if you put letters into some of them and see what would happen. I mean, or see if they bring it up or whatever. But it's not a thing I've chased up at all.
No.
And it's not a thing I've actually really looked into in that sense. I do know the British government aren't really doing much to do with it that much, but hopefully that changes.
Yeah.
With disclosure and stuff.
Yeah.
It's a mad one.
Let's hope so.
Crossed.
Yeah.
See, the thing is as well, that is just touching on that a wee bit, right? The thing with it as well is that you all know that the mainstream media are not really, they pay attention to it and stuff, but it's still not getting the airplay it should. And I know everybody, shows like this, shows like a lot of podcasters and a lot of different shows, and you get people like the people coming out of the woodwork like Leo Elizondo and all that kind of stuff. Although they're going on a lot of shows, they're still just feeding people around the UFO community rather than actually feeding the
wider community.
Although they've been on stuff like they've been on 60 Minutes and all that kind of stuff, it's still not got as much traction as it should be. And I had a reporter ask recently just about a case, and I think it was one of the papers that was talking about doing something. It was like a web-based stories and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
One of the things I said to him, I said, look, as long as you put it in a good light, there's one thing you get fed up with is you get a UFO story or a paranormal story, and there's a picture of somebody looking at the sky and stuff like that. Just paint it a better light rather than making it look stupid. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's so. But good question. But I mean, in terms of that, Scottish government is a thing I'd like to chase up myself, but I'm too busy.
Yeah.
But I mean,
you haven't got time. Pat says, if you had a choice, Chris, which would you like to see, UFO, cryptid, or ghost?
I'd probably say cryptid. Because that could be maybe something that's come out the UFO. I mean, so because I'm more interested now when you get sightings and stuff like that. I'm more interested in what it's all about and why they're here and what they're doing, rather than what it is, as in like nuts and bolts thing or even the lights. I'd rather actually get to the crux of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Next question. Do you ever get any UFO incidents around Mullakintyre, Campbelltown? I'm not even going to try and pronounce
Machrihanish.
Yeah.
Well, there was cases gone back in the 90s because Machrihanish had a joint US British Air base there, which was which had like one of the longest runways in Europe apparently, but it's that base now is being decommissioned, but there was around about the time in the 90s, there was things seen in terms of black triangles. I've got some friends over in Machrihanish. I actually surf over there. I mean, and I asked them about some stories and stuff, but there has been things seen. I mean, there's definitely been like triangles seen and stuff like that, black triangles over the 90s. And even if you look over where Campbelltown is and the Mullakintyre kind of coming down, off the coast of that kind of inwardly, you've got like Ayrshire and all that kind of stuff in there as well. And there was multiple reports in there as well with black triangles and things like that. And I spoke to some people who were they used to sit up at this bit in Ayrshire and they used to watch, like park at a certain point in there, and they used to watch things kind of fly about at night and stuff. Years and years ago. But definitely there's been things seen over there.
Yeah. Nickname wants to know, what is Chris's most compelling story from his podcast and what would he like to investigate more and why? Thanks.
Good question. Right. I think one of the most recent stories we had where I had a gentleman come on where he's had, I wouldn't say it's an abduction scenario. Well, it's kind of an abduction scenario, but he's from childhood. He's had beings in his room. Or he's seen the beings outside his room first, and then they would enter his room, and it was quite a lot of detail in there. And to be honest, he told the story. I spoke to him. I still actually more of the kind of conversation with him. I'm not edited yet, but I put some of the story out. He's seen beings for years, and these things into his room. he stays in Farmland. I'm not going to say where he stays because they start off with when he told me the story, he wasn't the one that relayed. He just basically wanted to tell somebody the story. Yeah. And he said, look, you can tell the story if you want. He said, but I don't want because of my job and what I do. He said, I don't want my name, my voice heard or nothing like that. And I can understand that. Yeah. So he agreed. He agreed to let me relay the story if I could edit his voice. So I did that and changed his voice and stuff. So that's how I've just recently got that one out. But totally plausible guy. Met him a number of times as well. And so he'd seen these beings basically coming into his room when he was younger. He would just hide for them, and then he wouldn't remember anything else. And he would see them. He'd said he'd only seen like a grey type alien once, because most of the time he'd seen them, they were more like pale skinned. He said they were like more pale skinned, as if like you've seen like on the communion cover. He said that's what he's seen more of, rather than seeing like your traditional kind of grey looking thing. He said it was like that. And he said it would appear, he'd know when they were coming, because it was like this green misty light would appear, and it was almost like it was kind of outside, kind of phasing into his house.
Yeah,
they would just come in from
like a bleed through.
Aye, that's what he said. He said it was like, he said he could see the light shining through, and he said if he had a cupboard there and another cupboard there, the light would actually shine through the cupboard and then through the gap in between the two cupboards, as if it was coming from outside. And he said these things would be outside staring in, and then they would just be in his room. And then there was usually like 3 of them. And this went on for a number of years. And so he had that. These stories went on for a good number of years when he was younger. It stopped a wee bit in his teens and then started again. And one of the most kind of striking ones of the bit of the story, there's a lot more to it. But when he was on holiday, he woke up, and it was kind of like there was a being at the end of his bed, and there was like a kind of, only described it like an insectoid type being, but it didn't have like a mantis face or anything. It had like, it still had a kind of long type face, but it was, he said it was funny. He was lying on his stomach, so he was on his back was behind him, obviously. So when he turned around, he seen this thing, and he said that it kind of was unsteady in its legs, and it kind of got a fright the fact that he was awake still. Right. And it pushed its face into his face, and then he blacked out again. And this was when he was on holiday, like abroad, and this happened. But he said it definitely happened in the room, because there wasn't anywhere else, because he could still see the bed, he could still see the surroundings of the room. These things were in his room. And so that was bits of the story. So that kind of happened with him. And there was a few other things as well, where he said his son's seen a few things like shadow people and things like that in the house. And when he moved back into the house, there was other things that happened where he could hear this growling in his house for about 6 months. And then it just kind of stopped. I think he actually shouted at it to go, and it stopped. But how he managed to actually, I said, how he stopped them into his room, he used to face them out. He said he could see them outside, and he would steer them out, and they would go back.
Yeah, like retreat.
Aye, but he always put it down to something. It wasn't. He said if they wanted to take me and show me something nice or whatever else, it was almost like, I don't know. It was almost chalked up like they were kind of feeding on fear or something, or trying to create that fear for some reason with him. But another bit to the story as well, where what he told me, his mum and dad had seen, no far from the place as well, had seen a craft, or like some type of craft in woodland as well, which was years prior as well. But there's quite a lot to the story. I mean, but he's even, he said, like recently, he said I'd met him, and he said him and his wife and his son all woke up. They had a kind of funny sleep. They used to have nosebleeds and stuff like that. But when they woke up recently, they all had the same scratches on their wrists for some reason. And he's quite a sensible guy. I mean, the guy's a genuine guy, pretty sensible. And it's totally plausible. But that's why it might have not even made the air, but because he let me change his voice and stuff like that, I got it on. But aye, that one's so. What I'd like to look into more, the other part of the question, Ben McDo, I was wanting to do a wee bit more research up there and look into that if I can.
Oh yeah, definitely. Chris, Rick's just said, Chris, that entity is patrolling that area. So I presume he's going back to where you were talking about the red orb.
Is that the red eye? Potentially, is that?
Sounds like. sounds like it's patrolling that area.
It's not far for the same bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
something there.
But that whole thing in the same town. If you want to hear the story about the you got time to hear the Black Triangle story?
Yeah, I want to hear the Triangle story.
Yeah.
So
if you don't mind running over a bit with the questions.
No, that's fine. That's cool with me. So in the same town, where I stayed, where I brought up and all that kind of stuff, with the strange story about the house and the red orb and all that. And the red orb, you could totally rationalise that. I just thought it was totally odd, and I should add it in because it strung a chord when I heard that story about the other thing. So in the same town, this story's been covered in the past. But they've been covered a lot, to be honest with you. And I thought it was like one of the most prominent stories. And the reason I wanted to cover it is because I knew the guy. He stayed on the corner for me.
Right.
And he was the same age as one of my sisters. So I reached out to him and asked him to take me to the spot and where it was and stuff and what happened. And the funny thing is as well, which I've not really done, but like the bit where I say years and years ago when you're a kid and you go to a certain place and you feel it's a bit weird and stuff like that, it's in that vicinity. I mean, it's not right on this bit, but it's in that area. It's just, it's no far for it. And that was always the place where you kind of felt it was just odd for some reason. But so anyway, he was coming back from, it was an August night. So it was pretty light still. It was maybe like 10:30 at night, if I could remember correctly at the time. 10:30 or something. And he was coming back for being away with people out or something. But he was driving. And there was an electrical storm. So just outside the town, there's a high school. And he thought he'd drive up the back of the high school to get a better vantage point. Because it had playing fields and stuff like that. So you can imagine it's like rugby field, football field, and it's kind of surrounded by a bank of fir trees.
Yeah.
But you get a good view of the kind of sky at the back. It's all farmland and stuff. It goes all the way up. So he was getting a view of that, watching the lightning storm. And as he was watching it, you could see like a black, basically a black craft coming towards in the sky. Right. And I think at the time, if I remember correctly, I need to listen to it again, but at the time, I'm sure he said it looked like a kind of rectangle or something coming towards, or at the time, or just maybe a kind of black shape. Yeah. But it was still light. I mean, because it was like a summer's night, it was, although it was like a lightning storm and that, and probably a bit cloudy, it was still a bit of light there with the sunlight and stuff. So he thought this thing was going to land in the playing field, right? It was coming over. He thought it was going to land in the playing field, but it didn't. It was still further up in the sky. It was just pretty big. So he thought, I'll go and try and get a better vantage point here. So for where he was looking, the fields at the back, so it's basically like this bank of trees, the fields for maybe 4 or 5 miles, and then there's like another town way further up. So in between that, there's like a farm road kind of thing. It's called the North Rig Road. It drives in between all the farms and the kind of the mossland and stuff. So he drives into the next town a few miles and drives up to the back road, and then drives along the back road to get a better vantage point of whatever this thing is. So and this is literally a mile from where I used to stay. I used to play up there and stuff. Yeah. So he's driving along the road. He can't see it anymore. The thing's not there. Right. So he's looking about. Can he see it? And as he just crosses, like he's kind of looking about, crosses this bank of trees on his right hand side, and the thing just comes right over the top of his car. Yeah. So it comes across the top of his car. He actually thought it was going to hit his car because he was like down.
Really?
And then it goes into the field, right? It's into the field, adjacent field. And this is a farmer's field, and it stops about 50, 100 meters, like in the field, right? It's hovering about 15 feet off the ground. And what he seen was if you can imagine, see when you get a Toblerone, like a Toblerone, chocolate Toblerone, right? Yeah. If you turned that Toblerone upside down with the point down the way, right? Yeah. And if you had a point on the front of it, so if you get the length of it coming along, the point going down, and you put a point on the front of it,
on the front,
and you widen the back slightly. That's what it looked like. So he said it was about 40 feet long. It was about 15 foot high and it was 15 foot wide, and it kind of splayed into the front. You see the edges it was totally black. Yeah. It was still light at kind of this point, light getting a bit dark because it was quite late. Doesn't it? Up in Scotland and right in the summer, you probably could get a bit of light to 11:30, 12:15 at night. Yeah. So it was, the edges were rounded, and then it's kind of splayed out. So this thing looked like that. It was like coming down to a point, splayed kind of pointed front, and then just sat there. It just hung 15 feet off the ground. And he was sitting watching. He was just sitting there watching it, and it was like you're only talking about 50, 100 meters for him, if that, just sitting in the field. And so he's in there, and he basically, it's getting a wee bit darker, and he pulls out his he's got one of the spotlights, a handheld spotlight you can plug into a cigarette lighter. This was 94, right? 1994 that happened. And so he's shone his light on it, and as soon as he's shone his light on it, his light blew. And his thing, he got a fright, and he tried to jump in his car and start his car. His car wouldn't start, right? His car wouldn't start. So this point, he was kind of getting a bit frightened because he was up here. This thing's hovering in the field. His lights just blew. Can't start his car. He's now cacking it, right? So, so he had a mobile phone. So he phones the police, right? So the police said, right, we'll come up and blah, blah, blah. So they come up, and I think they're taking a bit of time. They phones him again. And as he said that, well, they start off, the police appeared, and as the thing eventually, so if he's parked in his car at the side of the road watching this thing, he said the thing just basically just came out the same way it came in, same speed. It didn't turn or nothing like that or go up. It just basically came right out back the way it came in, and it disappeared. And they said the police after that came along the road. They said they must have seen it. They said because this thing was coming out and then they appeared. He goes, so they must have seen it, right? And he said the funny thing was that so you're at the back road. He said there was like about 3 police cars turned up. There was like either 2 police cars or a police van, and then there was like about 2 or 3 turned up anyway, right? And he said the funny thing was they interviewed him in the car, like to see if he was like Combus Mentis or whatever, but they said they believed him. I mean, because they could tell he wasn't drinking or anything like that. He was quite sensible. Yeah. He said the funny thing was like it must have been like the superintendent or the sergeant or whatever it was, had been the police must have got him out of his bed, right? Because they said he had his slippers on in the car. Right? That was a funny bit of the story, because it must have picked up the superintendent or one of the chief guys. They said, "Oh, they're a UFO report." Ken, he goes, "Well, come and get me." So he had his slippers on right in the car. So they were interviewing him in the car and they seemed to believe him. And he said the funny thing was the police car in front of me, right? The guy jumped out the police car and he jumped the fence and he went over and he put a traffic cone where this thing was sitting. Yeah, I never told him where it was.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
So they must have been watching it as well.
Must have. I mean, so he said as well so they took him home, and he said as well they'd seen something else on the way home, but they said that they never seen it or whatever. But he got home. I think his car either just started again the next day or 2 days later or whatever. I think it was something like that. And they sent it was either A or RAC came out to check his car over. Because he was into cars and stuff like that. That's kind of what he was into. And they came and checked it all over. And they said the only thing it could potentially do that was maybe to knock it all out like that. And I don't know if it just drained the battery or no or whatever, but his car was basically knocked out and then it just restarted again. So he said the only thing it'd probably do that was a large electromagnetic field would probably cut it out. And he said, "Will you next day like some power lines or something like that?" And there's nothing up there. There's nothing up there like that. But
other than the electrical storm.
The interesting bit of the thing was he was his mum and dad were on holiday. I think he was like maybe early 20s. He was maybe like 22 or something at the time. And his mum and dad were on holiday. So he ended up, the police and all that were obviously dropped him off, and then like the press got wind of it, and then people were interviewing him. It was in the papers. So his mum and dad seen it on holiday before he actually got to tell them. So they seen it in the paper when they're on holiday. So, so the interesting thing with it is, though, he said when it got investigated and all that, and the guy was like, no one anything like that at all. Pretty plausible guy. He wasn't the guy, any of these type of guys. Basically, like, I'm like that, goes out and doing the pub or anything like that. He's just always in the cars and doing stuff like that. You know what I mean? So, totally plausible. You know what I mean? You wouldn't kind of make something like this up. And the police believed him and stuff like that. And there was loads of kind of things about it at the time. I think even the Strange But True done something on it. But I was talking to him about that, and he said, "I've not even watched it." And he just didn't really, he wasn't really, I think he follows a wee bit now and stuff like that. But the interesting thing was, is when some of the investigators at the time were doing a wee bit of work looking at the case and stuff, they got the transcripts for the call going through the police.
Right, yeah.
And for the time, he was up there about, let's say 11ish. I can't remember the exact time. It was like, say 11, half 11 or something. He never put the call through to the police until it was something like 1:30 or 2:00 or whatever it was. So he'd lost roughly about an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Yeah.
Because he presumed he was only there for the 20-25 minutes.
Yeah.
But when you look at the time scales when he'd actually called the police, it looked like he'd lost maybe like an hour and a half of time.
Wow.
But one thing he'd never relayed before, but they said, I've never kind of told this, he says, but shortly after it, I had a dream that I went inside it.
Yeah.
He said I was like minding up steps going in the back and stuff and seeing like things inside it and stuff like lights and that. I can't mind seeing anything like aliens or bodies or anything like that. So I can I can have a weird dream where I was inside this thing.
Yeah.
He said I didn't relay that, so I just chalked up to a dream. But I always kind of found it a right interesting case because it was in my hometown and it was like literally a mile away from me.
Yeah.
And because the police and that were involved as well and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that adds to it a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, I say it makes a big difference. The credibility of the witnesses in the story and just everything that goes with it.
Yeah.
Totally. Aye.
Yeah. Right. Next question. Paul Hadley. Has there been any more sightings of the giant fleas near a haunted hotel somewhere in Scotland?
That was 2 giants. Deborah Hatswell covered that.
I've not heard of this before.
Yeah.
Oh, was that the one where
a couple were coming out in the fog?
Oh, what was that? Sorry, was that like a Bigfoot type thing, or
no? It was a hotel. From what I remember, it was a hotel, and this couple were coming out of the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
There was quite a bit of fog. It wasn't like a pea super. But it was dense enough, and they could hear somebody coming towards them, and it was like 2 giants with ginger hair and kilts on and everything.
Yeah.
I've personally not heard that one myself, so I do apologise for that.
About it, and I'll send you the link.
Wasn't that in the 90s?
I think so. Yeah.
Or was it later than that?
No, I think it was 90.
I'm sure.
I've not heard that one, so apologies for that one. But that picture I sent you was from a hotel where there's been sightings of a lot of strange stuff up there.
Yeah, I know we can't show it, but you can describe it. That is
private. So like the people at a wedding, and this is a general picture, but I've not got permission to share it. But I showed Debs it the other night there, where 3 girls at a wedding getting a picture, and then under the shoulder of one of them there is like it's like something grimacing. You see, like it's a definite. It's none of their faces for overexposure or nothing like that. It's different teeth. You actually see the shadow line under it as well and stuff like that. And it's like grimacing. It's a kind of, you only see it for there up because of the girl's hair.
Like the jaw bit, innit?
You only see the jaw. And the cameraman asked him at the time who was behind you, and there was nobody there. But you actually, you see, it's probably one of the best pictures I've seen. But it's like, I'll need to see if I can. I know one of the girls stays in Dubai now or something, but it's like you need to get permission to show these things and stuff.
But even the angle that it's at, it wouldn't correspond with somebody standing there anyway, would it? I don't think it would anyway. It's not the right angle.
They're up like at the back next to these bushes and trees and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You would need to be right in at their hair.
Yeah.
Because like you can imagine there's 3 of them standing together, kind of cuddling, and there's like a chin stuck in. It's stuck right in between 2 of their faces at the back, but it's no overexposed or nothing. It's definitely there. It's like
it's as clear as theirs, really, isn't it?
I never when my mate showed me to start off with, and I do apologise for everybody who can't see it. I just can't relate it. When my mate showed me to start off with, I couldn't even see it. But then when I seen it, I zoomed right in. I was like, that's nuts.
Yeah.
Right.
I zoomed in and zoomed because you went zoom in, and I zoomed in and zoomed back out again. I'm like, no, you're all right, thanks. That's too creepy. Right, moving on. Yeah. Space Cadet Lottie wants to know, are there any reports of folk magic or rituals done and seen by the public in Scotland, like weird people in robes?
Well, I'll tell you an interesting one. Like recently, ritual magic and stuff like that. I'll tell you one, which is there's always been stories where I stayed, there was like people doing ritual magic in the towns and stuff like that. You hear just the odd story here and there. The guy when I interviewed with the Silverman, he said that he had stories that there was basically people seen in robes in that round about that same area where the Silverman stuff was seen. But didn't divulge the story. I've still yet to kind of go through with that. But one of the interesting ones that I was looking into, I joined like forestry forums and stuff like that, and then like and then put the post up now and again, and just no trying outwardly saying, have you seen anything paranormal or nothing like that, because a lot of them they kind of be bothered with stuff. And so I put a post up recently, and I've been joining them for like a few years now, and I put a post up on a Scottish forestry forum saying, what's the strangest thing you've seen in the woods or the forest? And once you get past all the posts like old Jimmy at work, things like that. But once you get by the post of people slagging somebody for their work, like old Jimmy at work before 8 o'clock and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So once you got past all of them, there was quite a lot of instances. There was a lot of black cat sightings, a lot of black cat sightings, and a lot of black cat sightings out the same wood. And also there was a few ones where once they get into some of these woods as well, there was like signs ritualistic magic altars and stuff like that in the middle of the woods and all that kind of stuff. And seeing that. One of them was on the Black Isle, which is up past Inverness, and the other one was over in Fife, I think.
But
there's you do hear things like that. You know what I mean? So you're not being here as well. You're no far from. This isn't to do with ritualistic magic and stuff like that, but if you're looking at stuff to do with like the Fae and Pan and things like that, you know what I mean, and the Secret Commonwealth and stuff, like from here, you've got your 40 minutes for Aberfoyle, which was the hometown of Robert Kirk, who investigated all the stuff back in the 16th century. And that was all to do with the Fae, and he basically was kind of like a paranormal investigator these days, but he died. He was found kind of dead outside at night, and he was supposed to. The legend goes that he was taken away to the underworld or whatever, and his body was there and stuff and things like that. But his grave's still there. But as I'm saying, I had a story up in Aberfoyle where it was somebody recording orbs and stuff in the house. Went and had a kind of conversation with him and seen some stuff and things like that. So interesting.
Next question. From Justin Apple, is Bonnie Bridge still a hotspot for UFO activity, or would you say it's Falkirk in general?
It's probably that whole area. I mean, people used to say it was Bonnie Bridge, but you had the outlying areas around about that whole time, which stretched from Bonnie Bridge, Stirlingshire, right through Falkirk. When that whole flap was going on in the 90s, it stretched right from, if you can imagine, where Stirlingshire, Falkirk and Bonnie Bridge is, right through this area. So all that same kind of stuff, like the Andrew Swan Black Triangle, the A70, and a lot of numerous other accounts, all happened at the same time. Even there was one just literally like a mile from me here now. And it was all the same kind of swathy area. I think there was a bit of focus on like round about the Bonnie Bridge area, obviously. The sightings now still going. Potentially, I've not really seen anything coming in me or anything like that. You know what I mean? There was, as I said recently, there's been a few sightings in the Livingston area, which is where the Bob Taylor sighting was, which is no far from Bonnie Bridge. You're only talking, as the crow flies, about like 15 miles away. Something like that, maybe a bit more than that, 20 miles, 50 to 20 miles away, if that. But there was sightings there a few months back, and then there was only sightings there last week. People had seen
that recent.
Yeah.
I don't know who's talking about here. Chris, Justin Apple says, Chris, did the guy have the initials PT? If so, I know him. Cool guy. Oh, is it that the Black Triangle?
Yeah. PT, did the guy have the initials PT? So PT. I'm not sure. I need to think of that one. I don't know what one he's talking about. If you can tell what account it is.
Yeah, it wasn't Black Triangle. There's a story before that.
The Black Triangle was Andy Swan. The story before that was, I don't know. The story before that was talking about.
I'll have to watch it back and find out.
Right, last question for tonight then, Pat. Any cases you know of in the Western Isles, Chris?
No, really, no. In the Western Isles, I know the one thing I would like to dig into. I heard a story, family werewolves on the Western Isles, which was quite mad. Right. But I've never ever. There's a few, and it's not to do with recent stories. I've not really actually heard much stories over there, but there probably is. I do go over there now and again. Yeah. And there was a story going back years and years ago, which I've not dug into a lot. I've just one I've kind of found in the net, which is about a family of werewolves or something that stayed on, and they were probably buried in Ireland somewhere. There was
Right.
another story. There was another story of some type of cryptid, which is like a mythical creature
Right.
that would come. It was like half man. It was like half man, half type of horse, and it would pull people to sea. And I think there was like a story going back into hundreds of years ago where these people killed it and stuff like that. But I mean, I've not done a lot of digging into it, to be honest with you. It's all kind of like mythological stuff, but I've no, as I'm saying, there's bound to be stories out there.
Yeah. Right. Well, that brings us to a close. So thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Thanks very much.
Been brilliant.
Yeah.
Any links or anything you want putting on the website?
Yeah, just the Facebook, the Scottish Paranormal Facebook page, maybe the Podbean page as well. On my
YouTube. When I put the video on the website, I'll copy and paste it on there.
Yeah, cool.
So on my on the Codes Unknown website, there'll be 2 buttons. So one will click to the website, and the other one will take you to the podcast.
Yeah,
that's all right with you.
Aye, cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
So thanks very much, guys, and thanks for watching, guys, as well.
Yeah, and thank you all for your questions. They've been really good.
Yeah,
I think it's the quietest I've ever been.
It is actually, yeah. Makes a change.
I know.
Right, so from all 3 of us, it's good night.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you to everyone, and see you all. Who's on next week, Deb?
Kinsella twins?
No.
I don't know.
You don't know who's on next week?
You done it to me again.
All
See,
right,
when Chris was coming on, I went, it's Chris Meek from Scottish Paranormal Podcast. Got that one.
Is that a good friend?
Which one?
Professor?
Oh, Tim Brennan. It's Tim Brennan.
Tim Brennan.
Yes.
Yeah.
So tune in for that one.
Yep. So Tim's on again, and it's going to be another good one. So massive thank you, Chris, for coming on. Thanks to everyone for joining the chat and tuning in, and see you all next week. So
see you next
week. Take care,
week.
everyone.
Bye.
See you then. Cheers, guys.
Good night.
See you soon.
Bye.